Chapter 530. Zhang Yingying felt that today's boss was a bit too talkative, and he was too inhumane. She couldn't help but tug at the corner of her clothes. "Boss, you didn't pull him over to talk so much just to give him a blow, right? It's just a bit of the investor's grumbling. You can understand it as taking it out on him." Her Majesty Empress Wu tapped her palm with a scroll. She didn't hide her attitude at all. "You haven't seen those nerds in the lab. I said, I can take this out to make some money first. But they said, this isn't my direction. Don't disturb my research." "Who do you think I'm talking about?" "It's that bastard Ouyang Chen." Luo Nan believed that this was one of the most elegant expressions for bastard. However, the aftermath of the battle between the two extraordinaries made the listener feel rather embarrassed. As for Luo Nan, he was under even more pressure as a reserve bastard. Zhang Yingying glared at Luo Nan, meaning, "You owe me a beating." Then she turned to Her Majesty Empress Wu, replacing Luo Nan as a lackey. She blinked her starry eyes. Although a certain someone is young, he's not to that extent. He's still very motivated. "Look, boss. He's so obedient. He's certainly very obedient. Of course, he's a bit stupid. He might not understand things that are too profound. If you have any requests, if you have any opinions, just say it. Just say it." She was beating drums, making hand gestures, and winking eyes. Luo Nan would be done for if he didn't keep up. From his perspective, Her Majesty Empress Wu was the apex figure of the world. It was not shameful to receive guidance and education from her. Luo Nan took a deep breath and really did ask for guidance obediently. "I hope Your Majesty can give me some pointers." "That's fine." Her Majesty Empress Wu gave a smile that wasn't a smile. "We're done talking about status and value. Let's talk about advantages. Where do you think your advantages lie?" Relative to me." Luo Nan nearly choked to death from this precondition. Zhang Yingying and Qin Yikuan both had expressions that they couldn't bear to watch. However, Her Majesty Empress Wu's gaze was very serious. Luo Nan hesitated for a long time, but he could only grit his teeth and speak. "I can't estimate the level of your abilities. However, I think it's possible that in terms of perspective." Her Majesty Empress Wu actually nodded in approval. "Your pure observation ability is indeed unrivaled in the universe." Such a conclusion caused Luo Nan's mind to shake. This was the evaluation of an extraordinary. Not only that, Her Majesty Empress Wu appraised him a step further. "To be able to think of this, you aren't completely stupid. Standing on the framework of formatting theory, you should be able to see more things than anyone else on this planet, including extraordinaries. There is no one who doesn't want to obtain these abilities." Qin Yikuan and Zhang Yingying looked at each other. However, Her Majesty Empress Wu changed the topic. "But with your current theoretical foundation, if you were to explain those phenomena and the true meaning behind them, and impart cultivation methods, it would definitely be a disaster. After all, you're just a result, not a process. If you were to promote your experience now, any investor would go bankrupt. In the end, formatting theory is still a laboratory product. It revealed some truths and destroyed the classical paradigm, but it did not build a new system from the ruins. You don't even know if such a system exists in the universe." Luo Nan felt that the meaning at the end of Her Majesty Empress Wu's words was a bit vague. It was a bit hard to understand. But before he could analyze it in depth, Her Majesty Empress Wu had already cut into the plane of reality. In terms of practical application, people nowadays don't need anything particularly essential. Even if they were given it, they wouldn't be able to touch it. Actually, you just need to describe a portion of the scene you see. For cultivators, for researchers, and for the social system of this planet, there is considerable value in providing a true perspective. When the vast majority of people in this world are blind, a guide dog is a priceless treasure." Zhang Yingying couldn't help but spit out a laugh. She managed to control the latter half of her laughter with great difficulty, but her pretty face was strangely stifled. Qin Yikuan substituted himself in from a different angle. He lowered his head to look at his own hands. He didn't feel like he was blind at all. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed at first, but he suddenly felt that he seemed to have heard similar words somewhere before. Of course, it wasn't in this style. He combed through the information in his mind and subconsciously said, "Poor deities know how to transform. Virtue matches the heavens? You still want to match the heavens with virtue? You can't do it right now. Your train of thought is far from being systematic. There is merit, but it's enough to cover the costs and expenses. Luo Nan understood. He really did understand. Isn't it just asking me to open a class? You old man actually went around in such a big circle. But he was convinced from the bottom of his heart. I understand what you mean. I'll go back and discuss it with worker Zhai and prepare a lesson plan. It's fine to limit it to the angle of the dripping sword. If you expand it too much, you'll directly bring them into a pit. Then I'll prepare a lesson plan and ask you to check it out. Having said this, Luo Nan couldn't help but ask, can I increase the value of my investment by opening a class? You're thinking too much. If you want to rely on education to make money, then your heart isn't black. Your ass is crooked. But education is indeed the foundation of many industries. As an investor, I have to offset the risks. I can accept losing money here and earning money there. Speaking of which, how's your history? Luo Nan couldn't keep up with the sudden jump. He could only speak the truth. Yes, it's very average. You should have some common sense. There was a very famous fellow in ancient times called Xiang Yu. When he was young, he had a very famous saying about education. It was something like, 10,000 enemies. Luo Nan laughed awkwardly. I know this illusion, but the specific content. Books are enough to record names. The sword is not enough to learn. 10,000 enemies is enough to learn. Her Majesty Empress Wu recited slowly, acting as if no one else was present. Luo Nan didn't understand. Luckily, Her Majesty Empress Wu explained, the times are very different now. The sword isn't necessarily only a single enemy. Take that fellow Jin Tong for example. It's nothing for him to kill tens of thousands of people. But in essence, he is still a single enemy. A true 10,000 enemies is a system of knowledge grasped by people in the process of social development. Politics, military strategy, science and technology. On this foundation, slaughtering millions of people doesn't count for anything. Even the entire planet will be covered by this system. If you want to use formatting theory to cultivate 10,000 enemies, then you'll be on Jin Tong's level at best. But I believe that with the framework of formatting theory, you can completely become a single enemy. There isn't a single true result in this world right now, but I believe that formatting theory possesses the potential and value. And this is precisely the reason why I agreed to invest and continue to invest. In order to curry favor with investors, you should at least put on a show first. Luo Nan subconsciously glanced at Zhang Yingying. Zhang Yingying grinned and made a face. Luo Nan couldn't help but ridicule in his mind. This type of investor seemed very terrifying. Her Majesty Empress Wu continued to speak. The art of war says, soldiers. Through 5 things. Study through schemes, and search for emotions. The first is the Tao. The second is the heaven. The third is the earth. The fourth is the general. The fifth is the law. If we look into it in detail, it's nothing more than one's own resources, the external environment, the calculation of intelligence, and laws and regulations. For you, laws and regulations are fixed and unchanging. If you want to verify their value, you will need to see how you use other factors. There's no harm in spreading the plate a bit larger. That way, you won't have the regret of killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. This is a painting, a thesis, and also a research report. I hope you can sell it for a good price. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied at first, but he understood the meaning of these words 2 seconds later. This was the true guidance of Her Majesty Empress Wu. There were more and more people in the art museum right now. It looked like everyone was doing their utmost to appreciate the exhibits within the museum. They were racking their brains to find their value. However, everyone knew that the most valuable part was the radio waves that traveled inside and outside the art museum. Compared to the mainstream, Luo Nan's group of 4 was moving slowly, but their speed was still a bit faster. They had already reached the innermost part of the art museum, and they began their return journey along the winding corridor. Her Majesty Empress Wu was the first to turn around. She tapped Luo Nan's shoulder with her scroll. You're able to listen to my nagging, and you're able to listen. You have a future, kid. Luo Nan looked at this young literary woman who seemed to be in her 20s. She spoke in such an old-fashioned manner, and Luo Nan felt very subtle. If you think I'm a moldable talent, then add back my honor points. Her Majesty Empress Wu seemed to have seen through Luo Nan's thoughts. If your honor points are deducted, then they're deducted. There's no way to add them back. In any case, you still have a certain amount of credit. I'll just sign the bill for you. However, I can make up for it in other aspects. Luo Nan, Zhang Yingying, and Qi Nikuan focused their gazes on her. They wanted to see what sort of treasure the Almighty Extraordinary would bring out. Her Majesty Empress Wu just gripped her scroll. She walked forward as if she were taking a leisurely stroll. There's a rather special situation in today's art exhibition. The organizer and the person involved are quite sincere. They didn't simply set up a stall and wait for people to fork out money. Instead, they personally came to the venue. Oh, it's those people. A small group of people were chatting in a corner of the art museum. Several brawny men in black suits were scattered around them, separating this area from the flow of people in the art museum. Her Majesty Empress Wu turned a blind eye to them. She led Luo Nan and the others over in a leisurely manner. A few men in black suits discovered them. They subconsciously wanted to extend their hands to stop them, but their bodies inexplicably went rigid. Even their facial expressions froze. There were two ability users who far surpassed ordinary people within the group of bodyguards. They wanted to make a move after discovering something strange, but the first thing they saw when they turned their heads was Her Majesty Empress Wu, who was holding a scroll and smiling. This time, even their thoughts froze. Her Majesty Empress Wu walked all the way to the side of the small group of people. Only now did the people in conversation feel that something was wrong. They all looked over in astonishment. Some people even subconsciously asked, "You are?" Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't engage in conversation with these people at all. She just said to Luo Nan, "Remember these faces. If you're not confident in your memory, you can take pictures. If you suffer a loss later and are in a bad mood, just choose one of them. Or you can slaughter them all. You won't go wrong." Her words caused everyone's expressions to change. But at this time, a few people among them clearly saw the faces of Her Majesty Empress Wu and Luo Nan. The blood drained from their faces. How could Luo Nan not know that these people here were the capital spokespersons who hunted for food in Xia City, as well as the bureaucrats who attempted to cooperate with them? He looked around, and the Hexaears database automatically matched them. A certain number of members of Congress, a certain number of upper echelons of companies, a certain number of famous brokers. Her Majesty Empress Wu said unhurriedly, "The vast majority of investors in the world should remember one thing. The largest investment should be placed on oneself. Though it's very likely to be inefficient, one shouldn't be a disgusting slug after the outer shell of capital and power is peeled away." Luo Nan faced these slugs, and his mood was unexpectedly calm. In the end, he just smiled and bowed. Chapter 531. The room was dusky. Only a moderate amount of light lit up near the desk to illuminate this corner. Luo Nan sat in front of the desk. The flexible e-ink screen placed on the desk reflected a glimmer of light, forming a virtual work area. It displayed the newest three-dimensional map of Xia City. Not only did it display the streets, buildings and traffic layers on the surface, it even displayed the structure of a kilometer in depth, as well as the continental shelf structure of the surrounding sea region. This was the result of a combination of satellite images and the Society's survey intelligence. The map was zoomed in and floated within the work area. It was like a floating city amidst the clouds and multicolored light. It was small, but it was spectacular. The price of such a map was naturally exorbitant. It was sold for 1 honor point. However, Luo Nan soon pointed out 2 errors on the map. He relied on his own soul cloak ability to take back the honor points in the blink of an eye. He even made a small profit. But even so, his debt of honor points firmly crossed the -130-point threshold, and it was still accumulating further. Right now, there were over 100 flashing red dots marked on this extremely detailed three-dimensional map. Each red dot corresponded to the scene of Xia City covered by the soul cloak. They corresponded to specific life sketches in the living starry sky. They also corresponded to the lives of specific people in these complex scenes. Luo Nan's finger moved lightly, and Xia City began to rotate amidst the clouds and multicolored light. It looked like he could grab it with a single hand and then crush it to pieces. He couldn't crush Xia City, but he could slaughter these red dots and their corresponding heads at any time if he wanted to. Ever since he met with Her Majesty Empress Wu, the situation had inexplicably progressed smoothly. That person's guidance was accurate and ruthless. It allowed Luo Nan to experience the fierce methods of an extraordinary. It struck the vitals of some greedy capitalists and the Xia city government. If one were to compare the use of capital to the cultivation element, then perhaps it could be viewed as soul strength. They also needed a material body as a medium in order to exert a true influence on the real world. Otherwise, they would just be jumping numbers. At most, they would only be able to stir up waves in the hearts of people. Originally, these red dots represented members of Congress, officials, and capitalists. They were scattered throughout Xia City. They didn't need to take the lead themselves. They were able to use capital, power, and interpersonal relationships to construct an incorporeal net. They used this to drive the power of the real world. But after the fortunate meeting at the Museum of Art, a portion of the originally interwoven network in Xia City didn't suddenly collapse. It was like the frail nerves of the counselors and brokers. It was on the verge of collapse. It could collapse at any moment. In addition, Luo Nan's side could follow the clues to the melon. They continued to expand the scope of their search, illuminating even more structural areas of the net. They also illuminated the fat and clumsy bodies of the slugs that hid under the shadows of money and power. This made Luo Nan feel that spending 2 honor points per day for this information service was truly worth it. Moreover, Luo Nan didn't just rely on the strength of the society. Take the Wraith sign for example. That ugly yet powerful Darksider species was climbing within the living starry sky. Time and time again, it passed through the mental windows of the members, brokers, and capital representatives. It spat out incorporeal poison threads, leaving behind a special imprint. As time passed, the Wraith sign would appear in their subconscious and dreams from time to time, trying to figure out the pattern of the flow of their consciousness and doing a deeper infiltration. This spider was also weaving a web. It was weaving a poisonous web that could wear away at people's hearts. For the Wraith sign, invading the minds of higher life forms and corrupting their wills was an instinct it never grew tired of. It could also obtain nourishment from this. The more it did, the more energetic it became. It was just like how it treated Jack back then. Luo Nan could completely use this poisonous web to control the movements of these slugs, to knead their wills, and to seize their lives. Of course, compared to these simple and direct actions, the Wraith sign wasn't good at gathering information in detail. The Wraith sign could identify the nature of certain thoughts and emotions. It could understand their positive and negative tendencies. It could even capture some relatively clear fragments of consciousness. However, it was unable to understand the complex social relationships and meanings within. Luo Nan needed to do a step further in summarizing and sorting out these complex social factors. He worked in this manner. Even though Luo Nan possessed an excited brain that continuously received drug stimulation, possessed the living starry sky style of rough clairvoyance, possessed the gradually perfecting embryonic form of the overall planning technique, and had the Hexiyear's computing space as well as the intelligence system of the Xia City branch supporting him, it was absolutely not easy to do this. It was impossible to rely purely on his brain to sort things out, so he began to write. There were pure words, there were tables, and there were even sketches that he was more accustomed to. Luo Nan stayed up all night after returning home. He drew a total of over 400 sketches, all of which were reflections of his thoughts. Some of these sketches were extremely valuable. They even had the tendency of becoming psychic drawings. Some of them were a complete mess. They were like scribbles. Even Luo Nan himself didn't really understand them. Of course, this sort of thing couldn't be done on a physical notebook. Luo Nan began to draw in the flexible screen drawing software. He hadn't slept all night. Under the effects of hormones, his biological clock, which had gradually stabilized over the past month in such a vile environment, was actually able to hold on. It cautiously and conscientiously sent out a message, reminding him that it was time for his morning exercise. Luo Nan didn't move. With his current special situation, forcefully maintaining the tempo of his cultivation wasn't a good thing. At most, he would maintain the habit of running in the morning. He wouldn't let the changes appear too abrupt. There was still some time before the morning run. He stopped racking his brains over his work and began to tidy up. The several hundred sketches were of varying quality. The main body was still an analysis of the negotiations between capital and bureaucrats. They didn't touch too many elements of the inner world. However, this was the result of an entire night of hard work. When Dean Wan Ta imparted the planning technique to him, She encouraged him to use parallel thinking to process information. It didn't matter whether or not the brain could restore it to a temporal array. Mutual blending of information, bursting forth with inspiration, and fuzzy processing methods had always been the advantage of the biological brain. What's more, Her Majesty Empress Wu had already spoken very clearly. With her laws and regulations formatting theory as the core, Luo Nan could fully utilize all resources to detect and understand the external environment. He could calculate and compare, and achieve the framework of the enemy against 10,000. This was the correct path. Luo Nan already had a few outlines of inspiration. He didn't need it. For the time being, he couldn't do it like Jin Tong, who possessed absolute explosive and destructive power. However, he could use the special effects of the Wraith sign to do many things in advance. Therefore, Luo Nan viewed these sketches as a part of the overall design. They were the prelude to the enemy against 10,000. He treated them very seriously. He categorized and numbered them one by one. Only after sorting out the general logic did he sync them into the second layer of the drawing software. As the second layer of the software opened, a deep and cold radiance flipped over. It filled the entire screen of the flexible e-ink screen and engulfed the floating city within the work area. The sketches Luo Nan drew drifted down, and then their figures and shadows disappeared. Only the consciousness that was connected to the external neuron could grasp their existence. Ever since Luo Nan drew those few inexplicable psychic diagrams, the second layer of the drawing software had become a direct display of his attainments in formatting theory. Unbeknownst to him, a marvelous change had already occurred here. A pop-up window bearing an unknown text appeared. Luo Nan cleared it out of habit, and the interface of the void stars completely appeared. There was a virtual brain at its center. It was the newest display of the app icon and its UI in the interface of the external neuron. There was practically no difference between the two of them. In the first place, this was simply the result of the two softwares' mutual communication. Luo Nan didn't know when it happened. Luo Nan reckoned that it was when the virtual brain app appeared. Its UI inexplicably seeped into the second layer of the drawing software carried by the external neuron. It completely replaced the previous format pyramid and the upgraded self-format core star field map. But it made sense if one looked at it the other way around. When Luo Nan first saw the virtual brain, its interior was nothing more than a few sparse bright spots. There were dotted lines connecting them. It was like a life sketch that Luo Nan had casually plucked from his living starry sky. But right now, the starlight within the virtual brain region was resplendent and boundlessly dense. It was like a bright silver heart that floated beneath the vast and empty scene of the universe. Speaking of planets was a bit of a waste. It could be said that it was the complete model of a galaxy. Luo Nan was very familiar with the scene of such a star cluster. This was the core star field that was transformed from the form of the format pyramid after his cognitive upgrade some time ago. It represented his self-format. However, upon closer inspection, the originally dense clusters of starlight now had some slight adjustments to their layout. They appeared to be a bit sparse. There were some gaps up, down, left, and right. There seemed to be some rules that could be followed within the meandering starlight. As for what these rules were, or perhaps it was just a momentary misconception, Luo Nan didn't know for the time being. This was probably the result of the intersecting effects of the two star maps. In any case, the mutual influence and collusion between the two applications was already an established fact. Right now, Luo Nan opened the virtual brain app and opened the second layer of the drawing software. The interface and the core looked completely the same. Moreover, the several hundred sketches that Luo Nan had sprinkled inside, including the 1,000 drawings he had drawn and accumulated over the years, still existed. It was just that they were hidden deeper. The two applications shared the same UI interface. They exchanged information and data. Their cores also seemed to be merged into one. Luo Nan didn't know what this meant in the end. Was it originally like this? Was it something that would automatically appear when the opportunity arose? Or was it some sort of special intelligent logic that carried out a mystical integration? What sort of reasoning was this? What was the basis for this? Luo Nan pondered it over and over, but he could only start with the external neuron itself. He revolved around this mystical little thing and made some conjectures. First, the external neuron changed, revealing the virtual brain app after he received Dean Wan Ta's coordinating technique. Was this an orderly change in the brain that led to the activation of a new function, or was it the coordinating technique itself? Luo Nan needed to verify this further. Second, whether it was the external neuron or the coordinating technique, they both maintained a certain degree of compatibility with his current cultivation system. This was a good phenomenon, and it was worth further excavating. Third, the external neuron itself seemed to maintain some sort of connection with the resources of the outside world. The two unreadable satellites made Luo Nan quite concerned. But in the end, Luo Nan was submerged in a puzzle that had been troubling him from the very beginning. This little thing of mysterious origin seemed like a dynamo core, but it was 100 times more powerful than the dynamo core that he knew of. How in the world did his father get his hands on such a precious and rare object? And why did the dynamo core use such a secretive and tortuous method to return to his hands? Chapter 532. I didn't choose it last time. Luo Nan subconsciously wanted to close this panel, but he stopped just as his thoughts moved. Her Majesty Empress Wu said that he had to make full use of his own resources to create a great article. If he couldn't even figure out his own background, how could he make use of him? Moreover, he really needed power. Every bit of increase was good. With a thought, the pop-up window disappeared. Luo Nan's consciousness clicked on the default option on the transparent pop-up window. He was not given any time to regret or buffer. His head was slightly dizzy, and the external neuron in his brain was already emitting brilliant electric light that spread in all directions. Oh, did I cause a big commotion? Luo Nan subconsciously stretched his heartstrings taut. But luckily, the lightning spread out from his brain palace, transforming from tangible to intangible. The path it followed also expanded from the polar domain's spiritual plane, dispersing into his sealed system. It didn't have any intention of continuing to expand outwards. Luo Nan was able to roughly sense that this should be a type of scanning based on the changes in the fluctuations. As for what it was scanning, he really wasn't able to figure it out for the time being. Luo Nan pondered for a long time to no avail, and there were no obvious movements for the time being. Luo Nan simply let it be. Even the system's antivirus scan would take time, let alone this. He refocused his attention on the interlinking UI. Right now, be it the warship or the exoskeleton, they were both in states that could not be read. Luo Nan was tired of looking at them, so he naturally cast his attention to the virtual brain at the center. At the very least, the other side was densely intertwined with starlight and looked much better. Luo Nan probed with his consciousness. When he discovered that the two sides were visiting each other, he had experimented with it. He could enter the fundamental image of my heart's a prison that was interwoven by the heavily chained crow. He was too lazy to walk through it again. He was only concerned about the vague pattern. Did it exist or not? How should it be reflected? It would have been better if he hadn't thought about it. However, in this star domain, his brain couldn't quite work. He felt that he was surrounded by stars, and they were constantly changing. There was no beginning, and there was no end. It was to the extent that he felt dizzy and confused. Sure enough, it's not good to go too deep. Isn't it like the saying, I don't know the true face of Mount Lu, but only because I'm in this mountain? He immediately withdrew his consciousness and observed from the perspective of a third party. He wasn't looking blindly, but he had some clues. These were the thousands of sketches in the drawing software. They weren't stored randomly, but in a specific area of the star field, occupying only a very small part of it. Luo Nan felt that if there really was some sort of law within this cluster of stars, then perhaps they were divided into some functional areas. What would happen if Luo Nan compared them to the functional areas of the brain? He projected the interactive interface into the work area, picked up the electronic pen, and tried to sketch it out. As soon as he started writing, he felt a little strange. It was as if he was playing a childish drawing game. He remembered that the very first diagram inside the virtual brain had been connected by lines, just like a life sketch. There was an outline that ran through everything. He tried to recall, and with a few strokes, he recreated the image and placed it in a corner of the work area. The original drawing was indeed very simple. If one were to forcibly describe it, it would be similar to a human figure, like a stick man drawn by a 3-year-old child, swinging its limbs and dancing. So far, there was no point in using it as a reference. After all, the outline of the core star area had nothing to do with the stick man. People would always inexplicably become engrossed in some repetitive and monotonous work. Luo Nan had probably jumped into a pit like this. Unwittingly, he compared the dots of stars and drew for over half an hour, all the way until he was dizzy and his vision blurred. It was truly evil. Luonan blinked his eyes forcefully. He even used the tip of the pen to scratch his head. He was quite conflicted for a time. Wasn't it too much for him to dig out a pattern from tens of thousands of stars? But that inexplicable feeling of excitement and bewilderment. It couldn't be that he was too idle, right? And at this time, the starry sky interface faintly lit up. Luonan blinked once more. There was a change. The UI interface of the virtual brain app, from a conventional point of view, referred to the mapping of two parts. One was the exoskeleton, and the other was the spaceship in outer space. They were like satellites, orbiting and flying around the virtual brain, but they were both in an unreadable state. But now, a new element had inexplicably appeared on the monotonous interface, which originally consisted of one main star and two satellites orbiting around it. Luonan waved his hand, wiping away the lines he had drawn before. He could now clearly see that a distorted silhouette had appeared on the outside of the exoskeleton satellite. It looked like a mass of dark gray mist at first glance. This meant that the scan hadn't been completed. No, the core structure within the mist was like some sort of abstract symbol, but it looked very familiar. The dozen or so lines twisted and twisted. They seemed to be meaningless, but it was very difficult to add or subtract a single stroke. Luonan looked at it for a long time. It was as if the entire world would be warped. This was the Wraith sign. To be precise, it was the mapping of the core characteristics of the human-faced arachnid. Luonan had discovered this warped structure back then, and he named his human-faced arachnid accordingly. This was the origin of the Wraith sign. Luonan scanned it once. What was the meaning of hanging up my believers? What was even stranger was that this mist symbol that symbolized the Wraith sign didn't directly revolve around the virtual brain. Instead, it hung on the outside of the exoskeleton, which looked very cool, but its volume didn't quite conform to reality. It was like a satellite of a satellite. Luonan felt this was strange, but soon, another image appeared on the outer edge of the Wraith sign. This image was a size smaller than the mist that the Wraith sign had projected. It was like the projection of a mountain, with dangerous cliffs and jagged teeth. It was quite sinister. This toy was even easier to distinguish. Blood Soul Temple. The starry sky interface grew richer and richer. Two more images appeared soon after, appearing on the outskirts of the Blood Soul Temple. This time, they were clearer, and they were very familiar. One of them was a vicious ape with long arms and a rotten mouth. This was Yuan Air. The other was like a normal person, covered in shadows. This was Mo Luan. They were both puppets manufactured by the Blood Soul Temple. Oh, there was another one. It stood side by side with Yuan Air and Mo Luan. This time, it was a mass of dazzling electricity. It seemed to warp and transform under the pull of magnetism. It had no fixed form. With the previous elements as a guide, Luonan quickly confirmed that this mass of electricity should be the projection of Jin Tong's soul light seed. Now, all three puppets were alive. And they were a size smaller than the image of the Blood Soul Temple. They were like small satellites that revolved around the Blood Soul Temple. On the next level, the Blood Soul Temple revolved around the Wraith sign. The Wraith sign revolved around the exoskeleton. Finally, the exoskeleton revolved around the virtual brain. In this way, a strange celestial body system was formed with layers upon layers. And so, Luonan knew that this should be an abnormal tree diagram based on the relationship between father and son. Not to mention anything else, the Wraith sign system was displayed. But what sort of standard was this? Scanning the believers? The incorporeal fluctuations of the external neuron scan seemed to cut through cat eyes and the others, but not a trace of feedback came back. And why was it mounted as a sublayer of the exoskeleton? Could it be that it wanted him to equip it? The new 3 layers and 5 images appeared. The tragic thing was that they were still in an unreadable state, but there were differences. The Wraith sign was completely the same dark gray color as the flying ship and the exoskeleton. There was no movement whatsoever. But the Blood Soul Temple on its sublayer was already faintly colored. As for Yuan Air, Mo Luan, and Jin Tong's soul light seed on the next layer, they even flickered with a dim radiance. Luonan's consciousness touched them. Sure enough, they were beginning to analyze. There was some special feedback. And as time passed, the feedback became more and more obvious. Luonan was like a doctor giving auscultation. His consciousness flitted over and over above these images, feeling the subtle yet continuous changes. 10 minutes passed unwittingly. The images that appeared before Luonan's eyes already displayed a clearer new situation. Luonan finally understood some information. It was a relatively intuitive measurement and feeling. It was reduced to a ratio of data that he could understand. 10 minutes passed, and a very clear difference appeared in the progress of the analysis of these new elements. Jean Tong's soul light seed's analysis progress was approximately 1.2%. Emo Luan's analysis progress was 0.7%. As for Yuan Air, his progress value was just 0.1%. Luonan could accept this sort of speed if it continued, but he was afraid that it would be like the visualization diagram, where he was stuck at 9% for 2 months. But the problem was that the difference in progress between the three was a bit unreasonable. The fastest was Jean Tong's soul light seed, followed by Emo Luan, and then by Yuan Air. Also, Luonan looked up a level. Unknowingly, the Blood Soul Temple's analysis progress had reached 0.4%. It was behind Emo Luan and ahead of Yuan Air. This was a bit messy. He needed to sort it out. Luonan moved his pen and rearranged the analysis progress of the 4 elements. Jean Tong 1.2%. Oh, now it was 1.3%. The other 3 were Emo Luan 0.7%, the Blood Soul Temple 0.4%, and Yuan Air 0.1%. The logic behind this was incomprehensible. In any case, it should be more difficult to analyze the higher-level elements. But looking at the ridiculous speed of Jean Tong's soul light seed, wouldn't it be solved today? Next was the blood flame order system. It was easier to analyze. Was it more compatible? Or was it more shallow? Lastly was Yuan Air. This mutant clearly belonged to the Blood Soul Temple. It had been reduced to a puppet, but it was the most difficult to analyze. Could it be that the natives of the Cloud World were actually a level higher and more complex than the Blood Flame Order? But how could it be more complex than Jean Tong? Could it be that the Soul Light Seed was on a higher level than an extraordinary? Or could it be that the Soul Light Seed itself was too weak so it was easier to deal with? Luonan pinched his eyebrows. He couldn't understand it for a time. The Hexa ear vibrated slightly. It was a preset alarm, indicating that it was time for his morning run. It didn't matter if he ran or not, but he needed to take this opportunity to meet with Rue 1. This was to avoid giving this pitiful girl the cold shoulder. There were also some specific matters that needed to be discussed and arranged with Qin Ikuan and the others. Luonan could only postpone dealing with this pile of problems. He hurriedly sorted out the doubts in his mind and put them on the tip of his pen to avoid forgetting them in the future. After hastily freshening up, he went downstairs. This was the time of year when the sun was the shortest. It was around 6 o'clock, but it was still pitch black outside. The cold wind and freezing rain continued. Fortunately, this was a high-class residential area. There was a geothermal system in the courtyard, so no ice formed. However, it was a different story once he stepped out of the courtyard. Luonan didn't care about the situation he had single-handedly created. He had cultivated with Gym Master Xiao for several dozen days. His physical strength, explosiveness, balance, and coordination had all far exceeded that of an ordinary person. Even though he was walking on a layer of ice that could be used as an ice rink, his steps were still steady and light. Luonan paid attention to the virtual brain's interface from beginning to end. The analysis was still in progress. No matter which part was completed first, it should be helpful for him to further understand this peculiar app and this peculiar system. Chapter 533. This mountain of bones isn't that strong to begin with. However, Jean Tong fought a great battle up there. His electrode golden body. I just randomly came up with this name. But his ability to use his metallized body to guide powerful electromagnetic fields is quite decent. It's precisely because of the ionization and electrolysis effects of high-voltage electricity that a large amount of bones were crushed and then glued back together. It's tantamount to refining and remodeling. What was originally a pile of broken bones has gone up in strength, and most of them have fused together. They won't break so easily. I can take them back and use them as souvenirs. I can sell them for 1,000,000 or 800,000. A white-haired old man was laughing and laughing as he analyzed the ruins left behind after the great battle in the seas outside Xia City on the inner world's famous professional review program, Physiognomy. That's right. Half of the credit for creating this mountain of bones belongs to Jean Tong. But the structure of the mountain's terrain and laws should have nothing to do with him. He doesn't have this artistic sense. Plus, I feel that I should have seen a similar design a long time ago. That's right. That's right. It possesses the elements of the inner world. It has appeared before, but there hasn't been any trace of it for a long time. I've almost forgotten about it. Besides, you shouldn't be asking me this question. The gorgeous host's exaggerated expression of astonishment could be translated as, Motherf asterisk cur. Did we find a scammer to cheat us out of our appearance fees? Of course, this was just a misconception caused by the host's lack of skill. In reality, when the program Physiognomy spent a lot of money to invite this white-haired old man, the veteran extraordinary Ghost Eye Che-E, to participate in the program, the Inner World's viewership ratings reached a terrifying 77% during last night's primetime slot. This kind of data meant that, aside from a portion of people who wandered the wilderness and didn't have the ability to watch, practically 99% of the Inner World's members were watching and studying this program. Luo Nan, who had been diligently preparing for his lessons last night, became the 1% who didn't fit in with the group. So much so that when he ran this morning, he had to make up for his lessons and watch the broadcast. This white-haired old man with a gloomy name was famous in the inner world for being a disrespectful old man. He once used his X-ray vision ability to wreak havoc for a time, making countless enemies. But he was still able to live safely and steadily until now. From this, one could see how powerful his abilities were. At this moment, Che-E was smiling so widely that his eyes had turned into slits. This was most likely because of the beautiful MC he was partnered with. Only God knew what he saw in his eyes. Don't look at me with that kind of gaze. Don't you think it's more fun to dig deep into your body and mind than to look at this mountain of bones? You're taking advantage of me again. The beautiful MC cursed under her breath as she put on a curious expression. You mean, here, give me the controller. Yes, let's focus on it. The first-hand video from Zhangji's livestream was fast-forwarded under Che-Yi's control. When it reached the latter half, he pressed pause. Let's not talk about whether Zhangji's close-up was based on her looks. Don't you think that this young man, who originally had the same demeanor as me in the past, now looks a little out of character? The director took the opportunity to give a close-up so that all the ability users who were watching the show could clearly see Tian Bang, who was standing on top of White Bone Mountain at that time, with a focused and cold expression. Afterwards, the show was reduced to Che-Yi's old talk show. There was no longer any meaning in watching it. Luo Nen closed the video and let out a long breath of turbid air. The thought in his mind was, someone finally found out. Thanks to Major General Tian's godly assistance. Only now did the stimulation of the external sound waves to his auditory central nervous system arrive late. There was a process of deceleration and acceleration, so much so that Qi Nikuan's speech seemed particularly slow in the beginning. Then he suddenly accelerated in the middle, appearing to be several times faster than before. Even though there were all sorts of discomfort, Luo Nan was still able to obtain a gap to divert his attention. He was able to successfully receive external information that he should have naturally ignored. This was one of the applications of the organization technique. According to Dean Wan Ta's explanation, this was to actively exert influence on the external material waves. This caused the concurrent information flows to form a sequence of tasks that could be fully received and processed. In other words, it was to force the order of the external world to act according to the order and rules of the caster. This was to coordinate with the normal serial work of the human mind. From Luo Nan's perspective, the so-called influencing the material waves could be completely replaced with the mutual interference between the mental and material planes. But this didn't affect his understanding and practice of this principle. Right now, this was just a very basic application. At present, he could only process 2 audiovisual information sources at the same time at most. Not to mention the obvious deformation caused by interfering with the information. He had to wait until he cultivated interference, sequencing, storage, release, processing, and execution to be completely natural, without the slightest trace of human interference. Only then could he be considered to have truly entered the next level. Luo Nan still had a great deal of practice to do in order to reach that step. So he didn't waste a bit of time. He absolutely wouldn't miss out on any occasions where he could use this technique. Perhaps it was the heaven's reward for his hard work, but the few sources of information he received this morning all told him good news. Qin Yikuan said, Senior Che has basically been making a fuss around White Bone Mountain. He has kept his mouth shut about Jin Tong's life and death, as well as the relevant battle deductions. And even though he's doing a program in the outer seas of Xia City, he's only messing around on the cruise ship. He has no intention of entering the country. His attitude has been relatively neutral so far. Is this considered good news? If he can maintain this attitude and leave immediately after the program ends, he can set an example and lead effect for many people. This is indeed good news. From the current situation, the restless situation caused by the 2016 billion in Xia City had actually been suppressed. Perhaps it was because hundreds of corpses had been strewn across number 9 and number 10 of Xia City in a single day and night. Perhaps it was because Jin Tong's life and death were unknown. Perhaps it was because the dark hand that colluded with the government, the military, and the merchant had been ruthlessly slapped. And Luo Nan wouldn't overlook the crucial role played by the Xia City branch in this matter. Half an hour ago, the Finance Committee controlled by Her Majesty Empress Wu had sent over the bill of honor points he had consumed yesterday. Compared to the impactful numbers in last week's general ledger, the daily accounts appeared dull and trivial. But the ledger that was pieced together bit by bit told him in the most direct way what kind of work the entire system of the Xia City branch had done in order to maintain the situation. And what kind of expenditure would it be if converted to the wealth of the secular world? But then again, Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't issue the bill to slap him in the face or make a fool of him. It wasn't to make him remember, reflect, or feel guilty. The practical significance lay in the fact that he had to take several dozen factors that appeared on the bill into consideration when formulating a battle plan. If he didn't do this, he would never be able to be considered comprehensive. He would always need others to wipe his ass from behind. It was absolutely not an easy task to take all the elements into consideration. Under normal circumstances, he needed an enormous staff. But the problem was that some extremely private personal elements could not be made public to the public. This was true even for Her Majesty Empress Wu and President Ouyang. Luo Nan, who was in the novice stage, needed to keep many more trump cards hidden. How to reconcile the relationship between thoroughness and secrecy was a problem that Luo Nan had to deal with. Her Majesty Empress Wu's requirement of being a match for 10,000 people corresponded with this. Luo Nan needed to frame the outline of a train of thought early on, and it couldn't be too small. He needed to have a clear goal, a broad layout, and even more, he needed to have a core method. When this backbone was determined, Her Majesty Empress Wu's bill could play an enormous role. He could use this to sort out clues, fill in loopholes, and stimulate inspiration. Right now, Luo Nan really did have an outline in his mind. He just needed to build a framework. He had already experienced success more than once. It was just that this time, the scope was much broader. Basically, as long as the Soul Cloak covered the area, as long as the Wraith Sign and the other believers were effective, it was all within his attack and defense range. Yes, there were also the resources of the Xia City branch. He would never forget Her Majesty Empress Wu's warning. He even drew inferences from one example. Not only did he need to see the resources, he also needed to see the opposite of the resources. His battlefield was far vaster than he originally estimated. It was far more complex. But what was very miraculous was that as Luo Nan gained a deeper understanding of the situation, he unexpectedly discovered that his operating space within it was constantly growing. It was like the network of red dots on the three-dimensional map of Xia City this morning. It was an angle that he had never thought of before, but it was unexpectedly easy to get his hands on. As the incorporeal net woven by the Wraith Sign continued to expand, the main thread of his actions erased the fog and color blocks at every moment, revealing his true appearance. This caused Luo Nan himself to be very shocked. Remember, this is just an illusion floating in my mind. Luo Nan reminded himself that all of these things couldn't be replaced by his fantasies and designs while running. He needed more preparation, more real experiments, and at the same time, he needed to be equipped with enough adaptability and hard power to make up for his flaws. Fortunately, he had already considered all of these factors in his earliest crude designs and had made certain arrangements. He saw the uncouth ghost eye make all sorts of conjectures about the Hill of Bones, and he felt that it was about time. But at this time, the virtual brain app became an X factor. It was still the same question. Would this sudden scan and analysis give him an additional trump card? Or would it make matters even more chaotic? After Luo Nan made his choice, this became the domain of the god of fate. Perhaps he could even pray to the moral integrity of a certain gene provider? Luonan stopped walking. An hour of running was nothing more than an insignificant warm-up, but his brain was operating at an ultra-high intensity, carrying out the rumbling operation of a deathly cross-country run. He even felt a bit dizzy when he came to a stop outside the community. This was a sign that he had consumed too much mental energy. It was just as Dean Wanta had said. The overall planning technique was never a technique that saved effort. It just allowed the brain to consume energy at the same time as it became more efficient. Chin Ikuan, who was running with him, gave him a thumbs up, turned around, and left. Luonan subconsciously paid attention to the virtual brain's interface, looking at the analysis progress of each new element. Then he saw, Jin Tong's soul light seed was still far ahead, and it simply looked like a bug had appeared. Analysis progress. 37%. The other 3 items added together were far from enough to make up for it. What was going on? Could it be that Jin Tong's specter was going to jump out after breakfast to take his life for revenge? Chapter 534. Today's breakfast time looked no different from the usual atmosphere. His uncle had just finished his duties as head chef. He sat in the main seat of the dining room and browsed the news. After his aunt finished arranging the bowls and chopsticks, she sternly berated the laziest Mo Peng to go downstairs. Mo Ya sat at the dining table early, but there was a diet meal placed in front of her. Though Mo Ya's figure was absolutely outstanding, who told the camera to make people look fat? Rumor has it that Ming Tang culture had made up its mind to let her have the golden edge of a high-quality idol outside of her identity as a rock singer. Mo Ya, who had yet to stabilize her footing, was still enduring silently for now. At least this was what Luonan believed. After the drowsy Mo Peng came down the stairs, his aunt turned to Luonan and said, "Are you free after school today?" "Oh no." Luonan answered obediently. Actually, he already knew what his aunt wanted to say. According to the report from the director of Wan Ta, his aunt had already made some sort of mental preparation yesterday. She specifically made a phone call to make an appointment to go to the orphanage today. Naturally, she wanted to meet with Rue Wan. Sure enough, his aunt's next words were, "I've already been delayed for a day yesterday. I have to go to the orphanage today no matter what." According to what you said, a little girl like Rue Wan should be more sensitive mentally. Since we have to help her and take care of her, we can't be distant. You have good intentions, but you're thinking too much. Rue Wan was the most special person among the people Luonan knew. She was silent and reserved, and she naturally maintained a distance from others. She wasn't that serious. She was cold and aloof, but she was very obedient. Luonan felt that this little girl's way of thinking had already pulled apart from normal people during these 2 days of interaction. She was like a crow that mingled in the human world. She used a perspective that transcended the species to observe the world. No, perhaps she didn't even observe. She just drifted with the flow and lived. Luonan even thought that perhaps all of her willpower and pursuits had been completely extinguished the moment she stepped onto the road of adjudication and Jack died. Luonan obviously didn't wish for Rue Wan to become a walking corpse, but he didn't have any clues regarding this. Perhaps sending this little girl to a normal family life would cause her to change? But there was a very delicate problem. Could Luonan and his family provide this kind of life? It's okay. I went yesterday. After Mo Ya chopped up the lettuce with her dining knife, she felt a little better and finally had the mood to reply. Rue Wan, she's still very cute. That orphanage isn't bad either. Although the location isn't too good, the environment inside is really good. I heard that the entire design and decoration was done bit by director Wan and the children. It's simple and warm. It's really pleasing to the eye and has a lot of style. Then did you know that your sudden arrival caused chaos in the orphanage and also forced Rue Wan to cross a distance of 60 kilometers to flash back and act cute? Luonan buried his head in his kanji, cursing endlessly in his mind. Also, he actually thought that Rue Wan was very cute. Was this a sign that they were fated? In addition to praising Rue Wan and the environment of the orphanage, Mo Ya also had a good impression of Dean Wan Ta. That Dean Wan is also quite charming. He is a very dedicated and warm man. I heard that he used to be a traveler, but after he gained some enlightenment in the wilderness, he came back to do charity. He's a very down-to-earth person. Is that so? Sounds good. Although Mrs. Luo Shuqing always had a lot of opinions about Mo Ya's sloppiness, she also attached great importance to Mo Ya's insight and evaluation. She viewed them as an important reference. From this point of view, perhaps her aunt firmly believed that her eldest daughter was the one who truly inherited her innate bloodline? According to Mo Ya's words, she slightly revised her train of thought. How about we bring Rue Wen out for a meal today? The whole family will go and find a nearby restaurant. 2 people will go to the orphanage and bring Rue Wen out. I'm afraid that too many people will disturb the other children. Luo Nen felt admiration in his heart. Empress Dowager, you've really thought things through thoroughly. However, Mrs. Luo Shuqing proved that she had thought things through more than he imagined in the next moment. All right. I'm going to contact worker Zhai. Huh. The child he's sponsoring is called Di Wei Wu. He's with Rue Wen. There's no harm in inviting them over. With these children together, it's the same as having a small party. It's not too restrictive. Unfortunately, time is too tight. Otherwise, the effect would be better at home. Luo Nan blinked his eyes. You really are thinking too much. Mo Peng had just defeated the Sandman, so he came to his senses now. He appeared very surprised. You're saying that I'm going to this party? You're voluntarily withdrawing from this family group. Of course not. I'm saying that the low-altitude public transport is too slow. I won't be able to make it in time for dinner. Who's going to pick me up after school? Mo Haihang spoke calmly from the main seat. Let your mom make a detour. As compensation, I'll send Luo Nan off today. This kind of fairness is really shameful. Mo Peng was like a dog in grief and indignation, but he could only swallow the bone his parents threw at him. Luo Nan turned his gaze in slight astonishment. Mo Haiheng lowered his head to look at the flashing news information on his desk once more. It was as if those words just now were the most simple and last-minute decision. 15 minutes later, Luo Nan sat in his uncle's family SUV. At the same time, he mentally prepared himself to face the interrogation once more. With this mentality, the gaze he cast at the driver's seat was actually quite bitter. You didn't do any proper work in class yesterday, did you? Looking up information and data wasn't a big deal. Finding false information wasn't a problem either. But that was all bought with points. Luo Nan really felt tired from dealing with such a scheming elder. But unexpectedly, his uncle continued the topic of Rue Wen on the road. He probed more into Rue Wen's temperament, mental state, and other elements. These were the things Luo Nan had been mulling over all this time. It was inevitable that he would say a few more words. He would discuss how to better integrate Rue Wen into the world of normal people. With that, he could not help but relax. He took the opportunity to use his half-baked, strategic planning technique to simulate a parallel mission. Aside from the conversation, he could also look at the virtual brain app. Though Jean Tong didn't have any more vengeful souls after breakfast, its Soul Light Seed's analysis progress was still at the forefront. It had already broken through the 60% threshold. There really was nothing that could stop it from advancing like a hurricane. Luo Nan felt a bit uneasy about this kind of bug-level analysis progress, but he was looking forward to it even more. Perhaps after this analysis was completed, he would be able to have a more intuitive understanding of the core of the virtual brain app. Looking at the interface of the app too much really made him irritated. His thoughts swept across the starry sky interface, and he would make new discoveries from time to time. He was certain that there were many functions hidden within this interactive interface. But correspondingly, there would be undecipherable characters. Even though they all belonged to the same hieroglyphic system, even though many of them looked familiar, Luo Nan was unable to decipher them no matter how hard he tried. Interaction was impossible, and the functions were limited. Luo Nan couldn't operate a single one of them. So it was said that characters were the natural moat. The obstruction of characters was the division between civilizations. Luo Nan couldn't help but think. Could it be that an inconceivable civilization truly existed behind the external neuron? Like aliens? Perhaps those undecipherable hieroglyphic characters were the carriers of an alien civilization? Similar thoughts had appeared more than once, but it was hard to form a conclusion. Luo Nan nearly believed that the road to school was going to pass amidst family conversations and meaningless fantasies. Then he suddenly heard a sentence, "Your search index is very high right now." Huh. Luo Nan's head went numb the instant his uncle's words entered his ears. He immediately raised the priority of the conversation mission to the highest level. But it was of no use. What are you talking about? Mo Haiheng switched topics with ease, and he struck right at the pit of Luo Nan's stomach. Yesterday, I asked a friend at headquarters to do a rough understanding. I can't calculate the specific details, and we don't have that much authority. But if we just consider the search volume and relevance of information related to you from the inner world for the past 2 months, your ranking is quite high. I'm talking about excluding the local information of Xia City. We only calculate the feedback from other regions to Xia City, including Quantum Corporation and some other sensitive enterprises. Of all the SCA members in the Xia City branch, your search index is ranked second. You are second only to a powerful person nicknamed Her Majesty Empress Wu. But starting from last Saturday, the relevant data suddenly fell below the average line. A statistical difference has appeared. Is it because the urgent situation has attracted everyone's attention? Or is there some other factor interfering? Luo Nan was able to maintain a normal expression right now. This was the limit of what he could do. But what was the point? Mo Haiheng turned his gaze to meet Luo Nan's gaze. I feel like you're doing quite well over there. Are you a celebrity member? All right. Luo Nan admitted that his brain was muddled. His planning technique was directly broken. He went in a few circles before he had a rough idea of what was going on. It couldn't be said that the Xia City branch's intelligence work wasn't diligent. If his uncle only understood from the local area of Xia City and went to a separate organization to understand, there would certainly be no flaws. But this old man just bypassed all of this. He set his hand on the flow of information and made deductions. This really couldn't be covered up. The only way was to completely erase all the incoming and outgoing information. But how was that possible? Could Xia City be erased? What about the entire inner world? The inner world could be erased, but what about Quantum Corporation? Luo Nan's thoughts were too naive. Could he get a refund now? His uncle didn't have any intentions of continuing to pursue the matter. Instead, he was laughing. He was really laughing, without any other emotions mixed in. You people of the Luo family are all like this. It's like you can gather the gazes of others no matter where you go. From the wilderness to the city, you're all like this. It's just that Shu Qing is a bit more low-key. Luo Nan mumbled, unable to speak. We should celebrate. You're able to continue the path of your grandfather and your parents. I've always admired them. I once wanted to participate, but in the end, I wasn't able to enter the door. At most, I was at the level of an archivist. So there are times when I'm jealous. There will always be a chasm between normal people and abnormal people. I can only comfort myself by saying that it's the distance between a genius and a madman. Mo Haiheng knocked on the control panel as he spoke. The virtual screen lit up, displaying a traditional 2D photo. Let me show you something new. The 2 madmen of your Luo family. Chapter 535. There were 2 people in the photo. Luo Nan was familiar with them, but he also felt that they were strangers. They both wore white lab coats as they stood on the cracked and warped red earth. The one on the left was an old man with gray hair. Although he was much healthier than he was now, Luo Yuandao could still see that this was his grandfather. There was also a young man who was a bit handsome. His appearance was vaguely similar to the old man. Luo Nan's facial outline could be found in the photo. This was undoubtedly Luo Nan's father, Luo Zhongheng. Both of them had unkempt beards. Their hair had probably not been taken care of for some time. It was messily scattered across their foreheads. Both of them had taut faces and looked serious. However, the scene they displayed was worthy of a round of laughter from the bystanders. The 2 of them had serious faces, but they posed like a comical comic book pose. Their bodies were half to the side, one to the left and one to the right. They swung their arms and kicked their legs. Their 4 limbs were bent and their heads and necks were in an upright and unafraid pose. It was like the most tragic scene of Swan Lake. Luo Nan really did laugh. Perhaps this was the first time in many years that he had seen someone reveal a smile. It was really hard to imagine what kind of situation this was taken under. Look, it's a weird photo of your grandfather and father. Supposedly, the person who took the photo is your mother. You've never seen it before, right? Do you want it? Cough, I don't. That good-for-nothing dad of yours once told me that if you really get involved in this field, no matter how well or badly you develop, you can feel their feelings at the time. You can see happiness in the midst of confusion. You can see difficulties in the midst of success. However, I usually cut it in the middle and make 100 copies of the one on the right. I'll throw darts and play. You can try it. Okay. The rest of the journey was very short. The two didn't talk too much. Luonan received the digital photo. The pixels were fine. There were no problems placing it on the flexible e-ink screen or using the external neuron to browse with his consciousness. Luonan hadn't considered how to design the darts yet. He just looked at the photo over and over again in a short amount of time. He looked at the image of the fellow. It seemed that the person wasn't just a gloomy and mysterious person that made people loathe. The flat photo gave the figure an extra side profile, making it more distinct. The SUV drove to the school gate like this. But Luonan only woke up from a dream when Mo Haiheng shouted. He raised his head. Mo Haiheng knocked on the steering wheel. It's time. It won't be too late to look later. Don't be late. Luonan's reaction was like a thief who had been caught in the act. He closed his notebook with a bang, and the speed of his actions had already exceeded the normal range. However, he also knew that his reaction was too much, so he subconsciously covered it up. Uncle, do you still have similar photos or something? Hide. For example, my mother's photo. I've only seen a few photos of her since I was young. Most recently, I discovered. Luonan paused and swallowed the words tree hole back into his stomach. But this question was indeed what he wanted to ask. After hearing the identity of the photographer, he even hoped that the angle of the photo would move forward and include the scene outside the lens. Mo Haiheng was taken aback for a moment before he broke into laughter. You've asked this question more than once. Ha! Luonan really didn't have much of an impression. When he was very young, around 6 or 7 years old. At that time you probably just understood what life was and what death was. You cried and threw a tantrum, wanting to find your mother's photo. But in the end, you couldn't find it. Later on, you gradually stopped mentioning it. So you've forgotten? Mo Haiheng was a bit surprised, but then he shook his head. There used to be a lot of photos, but there really weren't any at home. Before that bastard of a father of yours left home, he took away all of their photos, including the recorded videos. There were only a few single photos left. I heard that Qingwen didn't really like to be photographed. The majority of the photos he left behind were of him and your father. Luonan never thought that he would inadvertently hear this kind of information. He was a bit stupefied for a time. But a sudden quivering jolted him out of his bewildered and warm state in just half a second. 2 seconds later, the security team that had been following them all this time sent out a warning. Suspected sniper. 2 o'clock. Distance 2,700. Altitude 104. This was a simple warning only for Luonan. The corresponding tactical coordinates were transmitted to the members of the team through other channels. Luonan didn't need this warning. He just received a reminder. There was still an immeasurable distance between him and an ordinary, simple, and regretful life. And there was a tendency for the distance to gradually grow. Such reality made him feel helpless and resentful. But he couldn't show it on his face. He could only brew it in his heart. Luonan took a deep breath. Then he revealed a smile to his uncle. I remember now. So I need to go through it properly when I get home, right? Then, I'll see you tonight. He prepared to open the door and get out of the car as he spoke. Mo Haiheng reminded him from within the car. Don't forget about the dinner tonight. Also, bring an umbrella when it rains. Oh! Luonan didn't mind being drenched by the freezing rain he had personally created, but he still obediently picked up the portable umbrella he had prepared. Soon the umbrella unfurled. At nearly the same time, a low curse came from several kilometers away under the curtain of rain. The corner of Luonan's lips twitched slightly. He waved his hand at his uncle in the car and walked over the wet ground toward the campus. But Mo Haiheng called out to him before he even took 2 steps. Luonan. Luonan turned his head and walked back subconsciously. But Mo Haiheng had him walk around the car to the driver's seat. Luonan walked over in a daze. He lowered his head and saw the car window roll down. He was just about to ask what was going on when he saw Mo Haiheng reach out and pinch his cheeks. Ah! It must be said that the relationship between this uncle and nephew was harmonious, but their body language was always very restrained. From their perspective, this was an intimate contact that was rarely seen in over a decade. Luo Nan's face was a bit distorted as he stood outside the car window in a daze. Mo Haiheng laughed as he rubbed Luo Nan's apple cheeks. Whether it's me, Mo Ya or Mo Peng, all of us might end up throwing darts at your face one day. Rather than that, it's better to do this to your face. You understand, right? Luo Nan's face didn't hurt, but there was a problem with his fine control. In the end, he could only grin. Even though his cheeks were still being pinched, he still nodded forcefully. His uncle let go and Luo Nan turned around. He was in a sorry state a moment ago, but now he was calm. It was precisely because he understood that he had to do it. Mo Haiheng's car drove away, but Luo Nan didn't look back. He walked slowly towards the campus and sent a message to the security team at the same time. Target eliminated. Malice value full. Threat level low. A whistle came from the other side. It came from Cat Eyes. Pitiful observer. That brother just took a scope. But he still has a gun box next to him. These observers were often not members of the inner world. They were only active in the gray area where the mortal world and the inner world intersected. They certainly wouldn't be the main attackers, but they could become professional criminals at any time as long as the order was given and the reward was in place. It wasn't a big deal to kill a small bug like a chicken. But if the brain of a monkey was smashed to pieces, the results should be even better. Luo Nan spun the handle of his umbrella, stirring up the curtain of rain around him. It just so happened to be the experimental stage. So let's begin. East of Xia City was over 200 nautical miles away from the original discovery site of White Bone Mountain. This was already the international waters region. A certain luxurious yacht bobbed up and down in this sea region. Light, electrical waves, and sound interweave together in a cabin on the second floor. Number 4's foot eyes have gone blind. Cause of death. Basically, it can be determined to be the dripping sword. The sensors have responded, and the cranial pressure has clearly risen. Excellent. He's also confirmed that the area within a 10-second interval and a radius of 2,700 meters isn't a safe zone. Plus, he sent back a clear image. Right now, Number 5 is already on standby. Oh, this scum. He broke the contract and ran away. Where's Number 6? Have him stand by at an observation point 5 kilometers away. Then the only suitable location is Cloud City Water Village. Are you going to have him dance a cheek-to-cheek dance with the members of the Xia City branch? Maybe the dance partner is a devil ray? In any case, I'm not the one dancing. I'm not the one paying either. Someone grumbled at this time. Why are they called eyes? Are their photoreceptors bad? Because you won't be able to find 120 million similar professionals. Fine. I just feel that this will damage our luck value. Luck value is only meaningful when probability plays a role. Even if all things are probabilities, to break through the scale and enter reality. Hehe. Even though they were all observers, they all had the code name, Eyes. But observers were also divided into ranks. Those who raised their sniper scopes to observe from a distance of several kilometers and ended up having their heads blown up were cannon fodder level observers. Observers like them, who were drinking wine and sipping coffee in the seas outside of Xia City, calmly summarizing and analyzing the information transmitted by cannon fodder, were high-level observers. If they could still get their heads blown up in the vast seas 1,000 kilometers away from Xia City, then they could only accept it. Even with the logic of the inner world, this wasn't a possibility. Naturally, they were very relaxed. After selecting a few clear images, someone suggested, how about we let that high-level SCA employee go on a mission? It's just a matter of one command. Isn't that too much? It's not like we need him to cross the Pacific Ocean. Transferring between cities will put Xia City in a very difficult situation. They're all staff planners. I get nightmares every night just thinking about this sort of temporary assignment. But the SCA isn't a fool. It seems like quite a few high-level members ran off on a vacation yesterday. How crazy would they be to dare do something like this under these circumstances? And so this topic ended. But soon, someone proposed an improvement. Comparatively speaking, I feel like it's easier to mobilize the big sister singer of the Guardians. As long as there's an assignment, it's not a problem for her to run all 24 districts in a day. The company behind her, Mingtang Culture, is a very qualified commercial company, and she just so happens to need to increase her exposure. Another person interjected, "What's up with the label on this Mingtang Culture?" "Oh, there's the shadow of the Castlevania Financial Group behind it as an investor, but the Blood Flame Order has already run away. They can basically be considered a motherless child. Capital can easily cross the Pacific Ocean, but supernatural power can't." Chapter 536. Someone immediately came to a realization. You want the Blood Flame Order to take the blame? Logically speaking, it's completely plausible. They're anxious to regroup and make up for their losses in Xia City. They also want to borrow their previous connections to get closer to the water pavilion. Look, this is normal, right? But Mo Luan is already dead. What will they use to fight against two extraordinaries? Relying on the Black Widow's seduction? Isn't that a bit too old? After a burst of strange laughter, he added a suggestion. We can arrange a sufficient number of collaborators for them. This will take some time to pick and choose, but we don't need a century of lies. And there's one more point. It's more important than logic. There's more? It's the time node. Look, the Blood Flame Order's founding celebration is on December 21st. It's less than 10 days from now. The base of believers in the headquarters of Xia City has been attacked, and the elders have died. If they don't do anything, then they might have to experience the most miserable holy day of the establishment of the religion since the split of the order. Perhaps that would be the moment of complete collapse. You all know that when it comes to worship and faith, that's the best reason. Bang bang bang. The sound of knocking on the table rang out. A group of eyes slapped the table and cried out in praise. Mother ****. Now that you mention it, I feel like the Blood Flame Order wouldn't stir up trouble. It's simply illogical. Soon, this group of high-level observers perfected their brilliant ideas into a plan. It was the result of their observation today, sealed, stored, and sent. After the small excitement passed, everyone returned to a state of boredom. After all, there weren't just one or two similar ideas and plans in these 2 days. It wasn't just 8 or 10 either. It was dozens or hundreds. A person in charge of organizing sighed. All of them have designs on the protectors. Aunts, uncles, older sisters, older brothers, and even aunts and aunts. It looks like a plate of sweet and sour, tasty, soft persimmons. The cabin rumbled with laughter. This group of eyes had the most right to speak on this topic. He was the first to express his stance, but he's not an extraordinary. Youngsters will always do foolish things due to impulsiveness. The Xia City branch may seem powerful, but they've already sunk into the gutter. They let a child affect their plans. Even if the child's future is bright, talent doesn't equal intelligence. I heard that the kid still doesn't agree to the safe house plan. He wants to maintain his original pace of life. Then life will teach him how to be a man. The offense is easy and delightful, and the defense is battered and exhausted. Even if it doesn't produce any direct results, it's still good to consume some of Xia City's resources. Wasn't there news that the voices of dissent within the Xia City branch were quite loud? If we can cook the frog in warm water and create conflict between them, or even turn them into enemies, it will save us a lot of trouble. In such a favorable situation, someone raised an objection. But this will slow down the pace. Very quickly, the objection was rebutted. Slowing down the pace is more advantageous for us. Xia City is just a mere branch. Even if they have 2 extraordinaries and a bunch of unreliable allies, they will grind them to death sooner or later if they really wanted to go against the entire world. This was almost everyone's consensus, and it was politically correct. It was unknown which idiot broke a piece of paper. The problem is that the alliance outside might not be reliable. There was a sudden silence in the cabin. Not even the sound of breathing could be heard. Fortunately, there was someone who laughed in time. I originally thought it would be a short trip. If we really were to float in the freezing rain for 10 days to half a month, my D***CK would shrink a little. When I go back to shore and find some fun, that would be a real misery. The group of observers roared with laughter. The idiot who just made a slip of the tongue laughed especially loudly. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to dispel the awkwardness between everyone. There was also someone who continued with a senseless joke. Be content. The cabin is clearly so hot it's like a bird's nest puddles. Ha! The person who spoke wanted to ask, who raised the temperature so high? But then he saw a human silhouette appear on the cabin wall directly in front of him. It was like a strange relief sculpture that suddenly appeared before his eyes. Moreover, this relief sculpture was alive. In the blink of an eye, it stepped inside. It was as if the metallic wall was nothing but a laughable illusion. The temperature within the cabin rose by a large margin. It rose by more than 20 to 30 degrees in an instant. Everyone felt a scorching heat wave assault their faces. It didn't matter if it was an illusion or not, such a scene couldn't possibly be a joke. Enemy attack. At least half of the people in the cabin jumped up. Although they were observers sitting in the office, they were all above average ability users. At a time like this, the equipment all over the cabin was useless. They had to rely on themselves. Some people fell under the table at the first moment to hide, and through their own channels, they sent out warnings and distress messages. There were also full-time combat and security personnel on the ship, but until now, they hadn't done a good job of security. No matter who was in the cabin, there was an unsolvable doubt in their hearts. Who was the attacker? How did he board the ship? After a short half a second, all doubts became meaningless. The first person to discover it, and also the person who jumped the earliest, suddenly withered. His facial features and 7 orifices spurted out blood-red flames, and his exposed skin wrinkled, as if all the water had been sucked out in an instant, and without a doubt, all the vitality had been sucked out. Blood flames! Amidst the scream, another person was hit by the blood flames and fell to the ground with a scream. Outside the cabin, the footsteps and shouts of the security personnel were already concentrated. Even before the footsteps, the cabin door rumbled. The strongest person on the ship, the B-class expert Su Hu, had already broken through the door, wanting to catch the attacker unprepared. However, at this time, the attacker's human figure once again turned into nothingness. His originally substantial body turned into a strange smoke that surged like fog, and countless sparks burst out from it. All the people in the cabin were hit by the rain and dew, and no one could avoid it. Suffocating fog, shattering fire. F***ck me. Su Hu couldn't help but curse. At the same time, he dashed out of the cabin door at an even faster speed, knocking into the security personnel behind him and sending them flying. He was actually saving someone. Almost at the instant he retreated, the cabin exploded with a rumble. Flames with a bewitching and thick blood color chased after his figure, spurting out from the cabin door and forming a ferocious flame tongue. The impact even blasted through the corridor, the cabin walls, and a small part of the ship's hull, flickering in the freezing rain on the sea surface. The security personnel at the door were swaying left and right. In the end, only 2 or 3 unlucky people were burned to charcoal. This was already the best result. As for the cabin where the high-ranking observers were, it was completely filled with the blood flames, and miserable screams rang out incessantly. There wasn't a single struggle of life inside, only the despairing wails of life as it turned to ash. Just as they expected, they indeed didn't encounter the dripping sword domain. However, outside of their logic and imagination, there was a blood flame massacre that came straight to their door. As the highest person in charge of the security team, the B-class expert Su Hu's face was ashen, and he didn't say a word. His subordinates were still trying to extinguish the fire. He didn't stop them, but he knew that this was a meaningless action. Blood seizes the soul. Flames destroys the body. Under such a vicious blood flame, even if the eyes were forcibly dragged out of the fire, there was no hope of survival. Reality proved his judgment. By the time the security personnel extinguished the flames, 80 to 90% of the people in the fire were dead. Those who were temporarily hanging on to life had large areas of burns. The fire poison had invaded their internal organs, and most of their bodies were cooked. It was better to die. As for the assailants, they had long since flown away into the distance. Their whereabouts were unknown. Su Hu stepped into the fire, and he nearly stepped on a certain eye on the verge of death. This high-ranking observer was nearly burnt to the floor. He unconsciously moaned. Su Hu's hearing was exceptional, so he could hear it clearly. The blood flame order has gone mad. The spider has gone mad. No matter how strong the winds of the seas outside of Xia City were, it was impossible to blow the moans and the smell of burnt flesh 1,000 kilometers away onto dry land. There was no need to even mention the distant region that was separated by a metropolis. 150 kilometers west of the satellite city of Xia City, Anzhong, was an undulating hilly region. It was also the complete scope of the wilderness. And at the northeastern edge of the hilly region, there was a cave building that was carved into the inside of the hill. It was known as the Picnic Inn. The architectural style of the Picnic Inn was extremely vagrant. It was said that several decades ago, it was the settlement area of a vagrant tribe. But now, its main function was to provide food, lodging, and supplies. It belonged to the explorers, wilderness vagrants, and other complex groups of people. It was also one of the most legal civilian facilities in the wilderness. Johnny was the 7th owner of the Picnic Inn. The reason why he bought this place was obviously because it could make money, a lot of money. But there was another secondary reason. The Picnic Inn was located behind the District 27 infrasonic array of Xia City. It was located behind the permanent fortifications, and it could give customers a stronger sense of security. But ever since the appearance of the humanoid infrasonic array in Xia City, several similar permanent fortifications surrounding Xia City had dropped in importance. The Picnic Inn also became the target of ridicule for the tourists. Luckily, Johnny didn't count on it to make a living. Instead, he really liked the popularity of this topic, the large amounts of information, and the explosive increase in income. Ever since the night of December 8th, Xia City entered into a state of emergency. The number of people staying in the Picnic Inn and the number of customers increased explosively. 99% of the current guests came for the Miss 2000th and the humanoid infrasonic array. And the Xia City branch's refusal order had a bit of effect. This group of losers who wanted to take advantage of the situation were like a group of red-eyed mice. They were drooling over the fragrant bait, but they didn't dare to step into the iron cage filled with killing intent. They could only wander around the outskirts of Xia City. During these 2 days, there were a few people or teams that accepted employment to infiltrate Xia City for an adventure. There were also some people or teams that were still looking for opportunities. Johnny loved this kind of atmosphere to death. Just the information on student Luo's relatives brought him millions of dollars in income. The corresponding risks were not worth mentioning. Who made him a member of the Xia City branch? Johnny sat in the corner of the 2nd floor of the cave. He was calculating how to upgrade his information. Perhaps he could participate in Student Luo's beginner class? If Student Luo was able to live until the 14th, then many people would be interested in his ability. When the time came, he would add, shocking. So this is the source of Luo Nan's ability. And so on. Just by posting it on the internet, he could make a killing. But what should he do during this period of time? Chapter 537. Johnny was still immersed in the atmosphere of his money-making plan. He did not react for a moment. Which bays? The lobby manager pursed his lips. The one from the Order of Justice. What kind of situation is this? He's still acting like a lord here. Do you really think this is still 2 months ago? Ever since the incident at Frost River Reality, the Order of Justice had lost 2 priests, An Wang and An Qingli. Their core combat force, the Oblatum Knights, were almost completely wiped out. Their follow-up reinforcements had yet to arrive. This branch of the Order of Justice had sunk into its weakest period. First Oblatum Zhang Xiao, who was currently in charge, had never been a powerful character. Faced with this complicated situation, his first order was to withdraw and wait for further orders. He had even disposed of a number of properties. The Wild Inn that Johnny had purchased contained a portion of the Order of Justice's shares. Now that they had all been withdrawn, the lobby manager's mood was as expected. You don't even have a share, so why are you still pretending to be a big-tailed wolf? Johnny originally wanted to chat with the lobby manager about the art of management, but his sharp eyes, honed from years of chaos, discovered that one of his most important sources of information had entered the tavern. Johnny waved his hand. So what if he eats and drinks? A B-rank powerhouse should have this kind of treatment. The lobby manager sneered. He's an Oblatum Knight. Without a priest behind him, how can he be considered a B rank? That's still 100 times better than a sissy like you who sells butts. Johnny sneered in his heart, but in the end he just said, "All right, let him drink as he pleases for now. If he really gets drunk, he'll spit out one or two of the Order of Justice's core secrets and change hands. He can even earn back a wine cellar." He dismissed the lobby manager with just a few words, telling this fake man, who was pinching his thumb and middle finger, to scram. Johnny sighed with emotion at the demeanor and knowledge that a professional manager should have. He swept his eyes over the bar on the first floor, and his eyelids twitched. Blood energy. That was a super drink that could only be purchased with honor points and other channels from the inner world. But not only did Baze gulp it down like a whale, he even used it as a topping. At this moment, even Johnny was suspicious. Could it be that the bastard knew that his shares had been withdrawn, so he came here to play the fool? But as the boss, since he had already spoken, he could only brace himself and persevere. At this time, the source of information had already arrived on the second floor. He waved at the person. "Hey, black box. F***CKU, it's a metal box. It's just a name, there's no difference. However, if you can take out something better, I can even call you treasure." Pretending to be intimate, they exchanged a few vulgarities and bumped fists. The two of them sat on opposite sides of the table and entered into transaction mode. Unlike Johnny, who was an outer member of the society, Ironbox was a member of the Xia City branch's action team. He was a core force that the society put more effort into nurturing. Therefore, they had a natural advantage in obtaining information. In the past, the Xia City branch was in a state of leaking on all sides. People like Metalbox had at least opened a window. Because of this, when faced with a gradual tightening of internal discipline, this brother was also full of complaints. "We really can't F***king survive now. We're purely blast walls, facing the nuclear explosion head-on, and then dying a worthless death. I must leave this place as soon as possible. That's why I'm in need of money and travel expenses." Johnny chuckled. "For the sake of our many years of cooperation, I'm willing to raise more money for you. But for the final project, we have to find a highlight or explosive point. F***CKU, maybe I should put some juicy meatballs in your mouth. Because of your terrible attitude, the prices of goods in Xia City have increased by a notch." Both sides used intimate and ferocious attitudes to carry out a close exchange. 15 minutes later, they finally reached an agreement with great difficulty. Ironbox once again raised his travel expenses, and Johnny obtained relevant information about a certain orphanage as well as the predetermined plans of the Xia City branch's action team for the next few days. Ironbox didn't care if the price was satisfactory or not. He walked down with a dark face as per usual. Johnny wouldn't tell him that this was the origin of the black box. "What? You're talking about black box operations?" At their level, they weren't worthy. But soon, Johnny lost the mood to tease Ironbox. In these 15 minutes, Baze ruined at least 2 points worth of good wine in front of the bar on the first floor of the cave. He smoothly knocked away half of Johnny's earnings, and he even continued to do so. This time, not only Johnny's eyelids twitched, even his eyebrows and apple cheeks were twitching. But he really didn't have the guts to clash with this famous muscle man of Xia City. Yes, this was the most fundamental reason. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve Johnny. He left his seat with a taut face and returned to his private room in the next floor of the cave. There was a time limit for the information. He had to make them pay as soon as possible. But not long after he returned to his room, the lobby manager made a phone call before he could even log into the dark web. Actually, there was no need. The cave Johnny resided in was already shaking. He only heard a worthless report. Baze stopped Ironbox and splashed him in the face. Then they started fighting. F***CK this black dog. Johnny finally couldn't help but curse. The problem was that it was meaningless. The worst thing was that the situation in the first floor of the cave quickly went out of control. For the first 30 seconds, the sissy could still cry to him about the loss of assets and casualties. But after a deafening explosion, there was no more sound from the other side. Johnny immediately made a call to the security captain of the Wild Inn. But the news he obtained made his blood boil and his vision darken. The security team he paid millions of dollars in salary every month was practically all dead. As for the two leading figures he invited to watch the scene, They didn't even have the time to exchange blows with the Oblatum Knight blessed by the priestess before they were drowned in the indescribably excited crowd of guests and drinkers. Right now, there was already a chaotic battle downstairs. Most of the people came for one purpose, but there were too many monks and not enough gruel. What 2,000 or 16 billion? They never said that they could split it evenly. Perhaps many people had the mentality of, the big shots eat the meat, and we drink the soup. But wouldn't it be better if there were fewer people drinking the soup? Hidden competition and suppression were always present, and the corresponding hostility and hatred were also accumulating layer by layer. With a big target, these gunpowder could still be controlled. They were temporarily stacked in everyone's hearts, but the premise was that they did not go off by accident. Johnny's scalp was about to explode. If the chaos continued, the accumulated gunpowder would completely explode. Even if this wilding could still be preserved, it would soon welcome its 8th boss. Every time this happened, the previous boss would always end up in a bad situation. He began to make frantic calls to various investors, as well as to the real big shots in the vicinity. The military had shares here, and they would occasionally receive some filial piety. Not to mention anything else, as long as they sent a small team, even if it was just for show. With a muffled bang, the floor clearly shook, and Johnny almost bounced up. He turned his head in shock and saw that the floor, which was compacted with red earth and reinforced with steel bars, had been forcibly pierced through. Half of the body of the metal box, who had just completed the transaction with Johnny, drilled out of the hole. His head was flat and deformed, and it looked like his spine was already broken. One of his eyeballs had exploded out of his eye socket, and the remaining eye still had a dark red bloody hole. The metal box blankly looked forward, meeting Johnny's gaze head-on. The hair on Johnny's thighs stood on end when he faced this scene. Then right after, the door with 3 layers of protection was kicked open. Baze, who was still clutching a bottle of blood energy, grinned as he staggered through the door. Soon, his boot landed, and half of the metal box's body fell down. A muffled sound rang out, and then there was no more sound. "Baze, you're crazy." At this moment, Johnny's voice was so sharp that it surpassed that of his lobby manager. He had completely forgotten what was the correct attitude. He could only rely on his instincts to shout, "I'm a member of the Xia City branch." He only remembered that a member had been kicked down the stairs when he spoke to this point. His voice came to an abrupt halt. Baze grinned and shook the bottle at Johnny. "This wine is pretty good." The sound of the bottle shattering rang out at the same time as the sound of ribs and flesh exploding. The remains of the bottle smashed through Johnny's chest and acted like a nail, nailing him to the wall. Blood and internal organ fragments sprayed out, and soon they dyed a large portion of the floor red. They even flowed down the hole that the metal box had smashed through. Johnny's eyes were wide open, and his mouth was wide open. His remaining breath and life force mixed with his blood surged out from within. Baze's savage smile dissipated from his dilated pupils. Baze slightly leaned his body to the side, and he piously knelt down on one knee. He placed one hand on the ground, and the other on his chest. "All glory to my lord." The scenery before Johnny's eyes blurred, and his dazed consciousness seemed to enter another space. He saw layers upon layers of grids. They were like the interweaving and spreading spider webs of a damp jungle. They stuck to every nook and cranny of the void. Everything trembled on the spider web, including his life force and consciousness that had yet to dissipate. This strange structure was dyed with a dark red color of blood. His soul seemed to be hooked by a strand of spider silk, moving up the layers of the spider web. But how deep and boundless was this web? He couldn't see the end at all. He could only vaguely see the shadow of a blood-red sun in the distant deep space. There were many limbs branching out from its edges, twisting and moving. It was like a malevolent demonic spider. It illuminated everything, controlled everything, and destroyed everything. Johnny's train of thought came to an end here. Fortunately for him, the wild and managed by the 7th boss was able to endure the destructive blow in the end. Even though a portion of the structure had collapsed, the main body still existed. It was just that moving the corpses outside really took quite a bit of effort. News and blood from the sea and inland were transmitted back to Xia City through all sorts of channels. It was already noon by the time it was widely disseminated. Luonan had just finished school. He returned to Gear with Xue Lei and ate lunch with Rue Wen and his own security team. The opportunity to freely use the building of Gear was decreasing with each passing moment. He treasured this opportunity exceptionally. However, someone soon interrupted the meal process. Before, I only knew that you were a third-generation researcher. Yeah, you're the third generation of a family of researchers. But could it be that you're also a hidden aristocrat of a secret order? Have the Blood Flame Order and the Order of Justice already crawled beneath your feet? Zhang Yingying's mouth expressed her emotions without restraint, and Luo Nan didn't need to do anything. He just had a wooden expression, and this was more than enough. Chapter 538. At least at this moment, no one believed that Luo Nan had anything to do with the Blood Flame Order. Also, the General of the Order of Justice going crazy over at the Wild Inn had nothing to do with him. Zhang Yingying was just teasing him. From her perspective, those observers really did court death. A portion of the communication records and recordings of the scene were salvaged. Apparently, those people think that the Blood Flame Order is a plucked phoenix that can be cooked into soup at any time. They want to do something bad and frame them. They don't understand how terrifying Xia City's Earth Fiend is. They just so happened to bump into a powerful member of the Blood Flame Order passing by, and they casually wiped him out. Cat Eyes beamed as she sipped her drink. She gave her own opinion, or is it an even more crude framing? Zhang Yingying nodded. It was done too simply. It wasn't ruthless enough, but it's definitely the core method of the Blood Flame Order. This is interesting. You must know that the Blood Flame Order is also branching out. The military must be very embarrassed. The situation here is subtle, but the Wild Inn is too messed up. A chaotic battle broke out, and the casualty rate exceeded 65%. They were so savage that they had no friends. It's not bad for you, but there are people in the society who were caught in the crossfire. You know about Metal Box, right? You have to show some appreciation later. Oh. Luo Nan responded. He didn't care about a little bit of money when it came to the funeral expenses. Zhang Yingying did not contact him just to broadcast news and ridicule. She also talked about the schedule of the elementary seminar on the night of the 14th. In order to take care of your time, your class is scheduled at night. Worker Zhai's exchange of insights is before yours. Ha! Ha! Hold on, why is Worker Zhai's first? Luo Nan suddenly reacted. He unconsciously drew in a breath of cold air. Aren't discussions always put at the back? There's no point in discussing problems that can't be solved. Her Majesty wants you to be responsible for solving problems. She said that she just wants to broaden her horizons and train of thought. You don't even know what she's thinking. You go up and start bragging, and all you brag is common stuff. Do you want others to laugh at you for the rest of your life, or at Her Majesty for the rest of her life? Zhang Yingying's words were stern and sharp. One glance was enough to tell that she had done her homework. The current process is to first discuss, form a hot topic, and then answer it. This is the correct path. What if you can't answer it? Hehe. Ha, your sister. Xue Lei, who was watching from the side, could not bear to watch. He reminded him. Did you forget what Teacher Kardashian said before? Cough. The matter has not been concluded yet. I'm just providing a way of thinking. Well, is that okay? Luo Nan was delighted. He slapped Xue Lei's arm heavily. You're too good. Zhang Yingying sneered. Luo Nan suddenly felt something strange a few seconds later. He scanned his group of friends and saw that the move Xue Lei had just taught him was being replayed in the group. Below was a string of people pounding the ground while laughing wildly. There were people joining in endlessly. The formation was neat. Bamboo Pole, the cynical man with a high IQ, was the last to speak. I've just written a small automatic analysis program. You can just download it from the group. It works wonders with the Hexa ear. We can see how many similar keywords and key sentences Professor Luo will say in one lecture. A bunch of people applauded and praised. The 10-second man truly lives up to his name. Luo Nan had a mental breakdown. Zhang Yingying, what the hell are you doing? Zhang Yingying giggled and waved her hand. There's only one thing I'm trying to say. Communicate well with Worker Zhai and do your teaching plan seriously. Don't think too much about it. Everyone has their own specialties. At present, you'll have a better future as a lecturer and swipe credit cards for everyone. The conversation ended. Luo Nan sat on a chair and let out a long breath. There was something he really wanted to say, but in the end, he kept it in his stomach. Did a certain someone misunderstand Her Majesty Empress Wu's intentions? Shuelei was very confused. What does swiping credit cards mean? Cat Eyes giggled as she answered. Basically, the boss is currently providing remuneration for around half of the Xia City branch members. You can look at his credit card bill for the specifics. Luo Nan's lips twitched. He was too lazy to respond. At the same time, he knew that what Cat Eyes said was more or less the standard answer. Zhang Yingying's intentions were very simple. It didn't matter if Luo Nan wanted to become a one-man enemy or a 10,000 enemy. With his current strength, he still needed to carry out relevant designs within the framework of the Xia City branch. He proposed ideas and paid remuneration. The Xia City branch was responsible for carrying them out, as long as his credit didn't go bankrupt. This seemed to be in line with Her Majesty Empress Wu's train of thought, but Luo Nan really wanted to say, formatting theory and the Xia City branch's operating model are ultimately different. What Her Majesty Empress Wu wanted to see most likely wasn't how Luo Nan would play around under the latter's constraints. She wanted to see how Luo Nan would come up with a more novel and valuable framework system. Right now, Luo Nan needed to ponder over what he could bring out for others to see, and what he could hide. Of course, this was not an easy task. Hey Nanster, your face is too red, right? Shuelei discovered a new situation. Oh, it's nothing. Luo Nan subconsciously touched his face as he spoke. It really was a bit hot. You didn't feel anything at all before. Did you have a fever? Shuelei grew serious. He reached out to touch Luo Nan's forehead. We martial artists either don't get sick, or when we get sick, it's a serious illness. The imbalance of body and defense, the chaotic flow of blood. These are great benefits normally, but when you get sick, you need to get them all back. The gym master often tells me about these things. You haven't been by her side for long, so I'm afraid that you don't know her well enough. Luo Nan was quite confident in his own state. He laughed and shook his head. It's really nothing. To the side, Cat Eyes was attempting to entice Rui-1 to open his mouth and speak. She saw that the two men were unable to talk clearly, so she sneered and said, maybe it's because his business is too big and he worries too much. For a while, he's feeling stifled. Luo Nan glared at her, but Shuelei was very much in agreement. Thinking too much isn't a good thing. You need to pay more attention to your emotions. Shuelei was helpless when it came to touching upon the core issue. He knew what sort of situation Luo Nan was facing right now, but he was unable to play a decisive role in a confrontation of this level, even though he could lend a hand. Luo Nan's complexion had already returned to normal while they were talking. But what Cat Eyes had said before was correct. He was indeed under astonishing pressure. And this pressure was brought about by the stall he had set up, some sort of order framework. Luo Nan was not limited to the framework of the Xia City branch, but he did not purely use the framework of formatting theory as his main force. To be precise, what he was using right now should be the altar framework. Yes, the altar framework that came with the fluttering curtain of rain silently covered all of Xia City and even the surrounding areas. It was the Wraith Sign's own altar framework. It was a system of rules where the winner takes all and the loser perishes. Compared to the emptiness and chaos of the formatting theory framework, this bizarre framework that had accomplished many meritorious deeds was more realistic. The Wraith Sign shuttled back and forth day and night for 2 days. It weaved an invisible spider web that penetrated the hearts of the people within the enormous Xia City. Thanks to Her Majesty Empress Wu, she informed Luo Nan of the identities of the capital spokespersons, brokers, and officials. She also allowed Luo Nan to grasp a bit of thread. Using this as a basis, Luo Nan extrapolated layer by layer, exposing a large amount of hidden details and veins. Luo Nan did not let a single one of the people connected, hung, or strung together. Luo Nan let the Wraith Sign move freely. From ability users to normal people, from soldiers to officials, from capital spokespersons to various interest groups, as long as it could permeate, the Wraith Sign would visit them one by one. It rapidly spread. The results were plentiful at this moment. That's right, the results were plentiful. It was easy to talk about, but one had to actually put it into action. In the hearts of tens of thousands of people, including the hearts of the powerful individuals whose strength was above Luo Nan's, the invisible poisonous threads were absolutely not an easy task. The Wraith Sign was able to do this because Luo Nan was forced to do it. Luo Nan was able to point out a direction because he was forced by the environment. He couldn't be considered to be a particularly intelligent person, but the terrible environment forced him to think. He pondered over whether or not there was a consistent clue amidst the waves of unrest. Was there a core that he could grasp? He thought to himself at first. Rue 1 was Miss 2000s. She appeared to be the core pursuit of all actions. He and his relatives were merely a stepping stone to realizing this pursuit. But upon closer examination, could Rue 1 be the ultimate pursuit of those people? Clearly not. Those people had captured Rue 1, and they wanted to exchange her for the legendary 16 billion or 2000s. They wanted to use her as a stepping stone to seek an even higher level of benefit and authority. And so, one level after another, one step after another. There was no end to it. And at the end of the boundless stairway to heaven, there was a faintly discernible silhouette projection. It was nothing more than the word, benefit. Luo Nan didn't dare to say that he had seen through something, but he was indeed forced to come to a realization. All powers, all powerful enemies, from beginning to end, were nothing more than people who pursued benefit. It was said, the world is bustling with activity, all for benefit. The world is bustling with activity, all for benefit. It was hard to differentiate. Reality proved that the core of the clue Luo Nan grasped was not misplaced. The human-faced arachnid possessed terrifying instincts. It had infiltrated its way down through this channel, eroding the hearts of people. It was successful in every endeavor. With the fetters of benefit, the incorporeal spider silk was able to form firm reins. From this, it formed an enormous spider web that covered the entirety of Xia City. It pierced into the hearts of tens of thousands of people, endlessly expanding. The area covered by the spider web was the location of the law of the altar. The people of the world sought benefit, and the altar gave it to them. This wasn't an incorporeal benefit. It wasn't a petty benefit. Instead, it was a great benefit that truly pointed straight to the core of life. It was the highest level of benefit that Luo Nan could give. Luo Nan's eyes widened slightly. The vast void that his mind touched was covered with layer upon layer of spider webs. They reached up to the heavens and down to the earth, connecting to the hearts of people. Pure life force flowed within this complex web that was indistinguishable from reality. It was to the extent that every thread and every corner of this complex spiderweb system was dyed with an endlessly fluctuating bloody light. The spiderweb was also a transportation network. Within the area covered by the law, it truly extended in all directions. There was no place it couldn't reach. Luo Nan used benefit to knock down the defenses of the hearts of tens of thousands of living beings. At the same time, he bestowed the convenient services of this transportation network. Under the basic rule of the winner takes all, the loser dies, the purest and most valuable part of the vitality essence of every loser in the system would be instantly transmitted to all the survivors, and they would share it and eat it together. Everyone was like this. There was no difference. Luo Nan had conducted tests in both the open sea and the inland at the same time. He was certain that the slaughter directly formed by the puppet Mo Luan was recognized by the system of rules under actual combat conditions. There were no problems. The chaotic warfare indirectly controlled by the believer Bays was also okay. Of course, Luo Nan needed to test further relationships to see whether or not the system could still achieve the desired results. But for now, Luo Nan had already gradually tightened the encirclement and suppression of Xia City. He had initially evolved it into a sacrificial activity under the framework of the altar. Within this domain, everyone used their own lives as sacrifices. They were placed on the altar, even though they were completely unaware of this. Everyone had ample opportunities to obtain benefits that exceeded imagination from the established rules, even though they were still ignorant and unaware. Right now, it was hard to say who held the advantage. But one thing was clear. Practically all the hunters had already been incorporated into the system of rules that Luo Nan controlled. They had to act according to the rules that Luo Nan had drawn out. Thus, Luo Nan's framework of being a match for 10,000 was accomplished. Chapter 539. Finally, they finished their lunch with much difficulty. After the meal, Qin Ikuan and Gao De went to arrange the security team's shifts. Cat Eyes began to fulfill her babysitting duties. She tried to get Rue 1, who was used to being cold and aloof, to integrate into the large group as soon as possible. Shui Lei originally had something he wanted to discuss with Luo Nan, but worker Zhai called at this time to discuss matters regarding tonight's gathering. Everything else was fine, but Di Weiwu had the temperament of a child. Some things slipped out of his mouth. Even if everyone had a tacit understanding, it would still be a bit awkward. Worker Zhai and Luo Nan set up a few topics in advance. When the time came, they would do their best to lead in that direction. After talking for a while, they naturally entered the domain of the class and discussion on the night of the 14th. In any case, worker Zhai was a guest teacher of a large society of Acumen College. He had plenty of experience in training and teaching. He saw that Luo Nan was a bit scared, so he gave Luo Nan an idea. I'll write down my thoughts first. Later on, we can discuss seriously based on this draft. Let's see if there are any areas that are more meaningful or controversial. We can use this to extend the main points and outline of your class. Actually, this is exactly the same as tonight. I'll be the assistant. You'll be the main speaker. I'll guide. You expound. We'll work together to fool. Luo Nan expressed his thanks again and again. He made a preliminary appointment with worker Zhai. They would meet on Wednesday, which was the night of the 12th. They would pull an all-nighter and finish all the teaching materials. They would set aside a day for Her Majesty Empress Wu to review it. Then they would go to the execution grounds. No, to the lectern. The call ended, and Luo Nan got up and stretched his back. He habitually performed 2 stretching motions. After Gym Master Xiao's training, Luo Nan was able to perform similar motions in a professional manner. As his limbs moved, his entire body's joints, muscles, bones, skin, and so on contracted and relaxed. His blood energy rose and fell, so much so that he could hear the gurgling sound of blood flowing. This had nothing to do with guiding. In a second or two, Luo Nan's cheeks, neck, and even his shoulders and back, which were covered by his clothes, were covered with a layer of bright red light. The surface temperature of his body rose a bit, and he even felt a bit swollen. Fortunately, he discovered it early this time. When he closed his eyes, the divine wheel and body wheel were coupled together. His internal organs, tendons, bones, meridians, and acupoints interacted with each other. Yin and yang rose and fell. This sudden surge of vital energy circulated and spread to his limbs and bones to strengthen his foundation. Sigh. Shui Lei opened his mouth, but then cut it off. He felt a little awkward, as though he was crying wolf. This was already the second time he had seen Luo Nan's face turn red. But this time, it dissipated even faster. It nearly made him think that it was an illusion. Are you blushing again? Luo Nan knew that Shui Lei was worried. He simply gave Shui Lei a vague explanation. Maybe it's because I've been trying to couple my body and soul to a deep level for the past 2 days. But now that I'm awake, I feel like I'm improving very quickly. On the other side, Cat Eyes was sitting next to Rue 1. Wen Yan shot a glance over and sneered silently. Luo Nan's skin was getting thicker and thicker now. He turned a blind eye. Actually, this current phenomenon was due to the problem that Cat Eyes had just pointed out. The stall was too large. The altar frame needed to be erected, and Luo Nan needed to bear enormous pressure. But he really did use his identity as the provider and defender of the frame order to enjoy transcendental privileges. Due to the existence of the rule of winner takes all, the altar frame system allowed people to die and their life force to be stripped away. This portion of energy could not be extracted. Instead, it would continue to be assimilated into the frame, stimulating and strengthening all the surviving participants. Everyone was treated equally. But the problem was that when people entered the altar frame, it was like entering a casino. Of course, there was the possibility of profit, but they would also have to pay service fees and administrative fees for this possibility of falling from the sky. Plus, Luo Nan's own closed system was interspersed within. A considerable portion of the hidden benefits seeped through the drip irrigation. Little by little, they accumulated. The Wraith sign didn't seem to care much about all of these benefits. He just helped the Blood Soul Temple devour a bit, realizing replenishment. The rest went through the large production line of the closed system, undergoing purification and assimilation into Luo Nan's boundlessly vast God Gear icy ocean. A portion was offered to the Soul Cloak that continued to expand, and the rest was coupled to drive the body gear to revolve. The gear set of the God Gear and body gear seemed to have been added with maintenance fluids and lubricants. It was also like a layer of furnace fire was wrapped around it, nourishing and tempering it without end. This was the part that Luo Nan told Xue Lei. The 9 orifices and 6 roots pattern ensured the efficiency of absorption and the direction of advancement. Gym Master Xiao once modestly said that there was nothing more he could teach Luo Nan. But the basic pattern he helped Luo Nan establish was one of the most important links in this virtuous cycle. This brought about a change in Luo Nan's root receptacle, a positive change in quantity, and even a change in quality. Luo Nan didn't know what his current progress was when it came to purely calculating the power of the body and soul structure. After all, this was not a game. Everything could be digitized. However, the analysis progress of a few new elements in the virtual brain interface was extremely clear, and it had increased by a large margin. This was especially true for the Blood Soul Temple and the Mo Luan puppet. They seemed to be quite fond of this. After some replenishment, the analysis progress of both broke through 10% in a single morning. But none of this could compare to the inconceivable bug in the Jin Tong Psychic Light Seed. Its analysis progress had already reached 90%. Though the speed had slowed down, it had not stopped yet. And this was not all. Luo Nan discovered an hour ago that the external neurons seemed to have been touched by a certain link within. Electricity spread out, and a new round of searching began. This time, the search was no longer limited to the closed system. It spread out. Fortunately, it was quite hidden. It was like the most ordinary electromagnetic wave of the current era. Its source was obscured, and it relied on the spider web of rain that covered the entire city to spread outwards. Luo Nan combed through the internal and external situation, and he could not help but sigh. Of course, it was good to have this kind of progress, but could he just ignore it once he had made an in-progress discovery? He no longer held any illusions regarding his journey over the next few days. With this intensity and density, even if his organizational coordination technique was upgraded to another level, it would still not be enough. At this time, Xue Lei finally walked forward. At the same time, his gaze swept a circle into the distance. He knew that it was unnecessary, but he still lowered his voice. "Nanster, I just so happen to have something to tell you." Luo Nan had long since sensed that Xue Lei had something to say. He immediately nodded and sat with Xue Lei in the coffee corner of the hall. This place was originally a good place to enjoy the bright and beautiful sunlight, but right now, all he could see were the raindrops pounding against the window. Xue Lei spoke just as they sat down. "I was chatting with the gym master yesterday. The old man advised me that I should put a portion of my energy into human-computer interaction in the future." Luo Nan was already used to being distracted and considering other matters. Even with his organizational coordination technique, his reaction was still a beat slower. He subconsciously repeated, "Human-computer interaction? It's like an exoskeleton or something." Xue Lei lowered his voice even more. He was even a bit embarrassed. Luo Nan immediately understood. Deep Blue Walker? This time it was Xue Lei's turn to blush. Luo Nan laughed in spite of himself when he saw Xue Lei's reaction. "Do I look very narrow-minded?" He then nodded after teasing Xue Lei. The gym master's suggestion is certainly correct from a practical point of view. God was the strongest of the several burners in the security team. His strength was roughly C after undergoing transformation. But with Xue Lei's current abilities, he would be able to win if he were to fight God barehanded, even if God had an advantage in combat experience. After all, Xue Lei's close combat ability had already broken through the limits of ordinary people under Gym Master Xiao's tutelage. He didn't dare speak of his architect rank, but he had definitely reached the C+ level. It was the highest level among awakened. But if God were to wear the Deep Blue Walker exoskeleton, Xue Lei wouldn't even have the chance to escape if the two were to fight again. This was the power of technology and the flourishing development of the archetype format theory. It was a bonus to individual combat power. A fleshly ability user like Xue Lei lived in the worst era, but it was also the best era. The upper limits of traditional martial arts were unable to cross the barrier formed by technology. But the environment that nurtured ability users, as well as the development and growth of theories like the archetype format, allowed them to seamlessly connect with the most cutting-edge technology of today. This was the great framework of today's world. Only by entering it could one obtain the greatest bonus. Luo Nan didn't enter this framework, but he wouldn't deny that this path was correct. Xue Lei's worries were uncalled for. Luo Nan himself couldn't avoid seeking inspiration from the archetype format. What qualifications did he have to obstruct Shui Lei's path of advancement? Therefore, he didn't speak hypocritical and emotional words. Instead, he cut straight to the point. It seems that the deep blue walker is unavoidable. Does it not affect your previous cultivation? Shui Lei let out a sigh of relief when he saw Luo Nan's reaction. He replied, "It's impossible to directly go and transform it. The gym master wants me to first observe and experiment. I want to treat the format of fire as a cultivation model to research. Therefore, I want to first discuss and compare notes with Brother God." Luo Nan nodded and raised his own suggestion. You can also use the burner simulator researched by the military and Quantum Corporation. They have it at Frost River Reality. If you need authority, you can just apply to the society. You can also report to the military. I'm afraid that they're looking forward to having a martial imparting expert like you as a guinea pig to provide experimental data. Luo Nan suddenly thought of Bai Xin Yan as he spoke. It was this female doctor who used the burner simulator to reveal to him the unstoppable development of the archetype format. But according to authoritative intelligence, Bai Xin Yan was the main culprit that caused all of the current troubles. Even Mr. Bai had solemnly apologized to him for this. Luo Nan had a general understanding of the reason why this father-daughter pair had a falling out. It was impossible to say that Luo Nan didn't hate her, but Luo Nan still wasn't used to the rhythm of changing identities between friend and foe. He wasn't used to it, but it didn't hinder his cognition. It also didn't bring him too much trouble. Chapter 540. Luo Nan used benefits as a primer to successfully infiltrate the human-faced arachnid's poisonous silk into the hearts of the millions of people in Xia City. This showed that his train of thought was correct. It was just that everyone chased after different benefits during the specific implementation. What they were sensitive to and what they were desensitized to were all different. The Wraith sign was the one who truly dealt with these detailed problems. This inconceivable demon had already surpassed the limits of Luo Nan's understanding of how to infiltrate layer by layer and how to succeed. He could only sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. But in his subsequent observations, he discovered that specific to the region of Xia City, specific to this 2 out of 1,000 incident, the ever-changing benefits naturally condensed into a few typical images and symbols. After all, humans were more accustomed to drawing on concrete images to think about things. Rui Wan and Luo Nan were undoubtedly the clearest two of them. When the poisonous silk infiltrated the hearts of people, it adhered to greed and evil thoughts. Layer by layer, Luo Nan naturally sensed it. When a person was being targeted by hundreds and thousands of malicious thoughts at all times, they would either become numb or extremely sensitive. Luo Nan was certainly unable to become numb, so he became exceptionally sensitive to these muddy flows of sand and mud. From Luo Nan's perspective, the sacrificial framework was like a transparent cup of water. As time passed, the countless participants were like muddy water in the cup, slowly settling and purifying. What was clear and what was turbid were all revealed in sequence. Under these circumstances, Luo Nan was simply playing a traditional online game. Red, yellow, blue, and white names hung above the heads of the players. It was bizarre and absurd. It was said that the human heart was hard to fathom, but it seemed that there was no place to hide under the ruler of benefits, though it was only limited to greed and malice toward him. Luo Nan understood this as the function of order. After order formed a relatively complete framework, it combed and cleansed all living things. Under this standard, the hunters that flocked in were insatiably greedy. There were apathetic professionals. There were those who came to have fun and join in the fun. There were all kinds of them and they were all different. The Xia City branch was not a monolithic block. There were warm-hearted people, indifferent people, two-faced people, and people who only had the thought of currying favor and making money. Johnny and Metalbox, who died in the inn, were just 2 examples. Deaths were not uncommon in a group of nearly 1,000 people. It was impossible for Luo Nan to hope that everyone in the Xia City branch would love him, that everyone would be like He Yuan, Zhang Yingying, and these other friends, who would do their utmost for him. Her Majesty Empress Wu had already given him a reminder, pointed him in the right direction, and even helped him open up the credit system, allowing him to use real benefits to consolidate the power of the Xia City branch. Luo Nan received the lesson, but he could completely build on this foundation to do even more things. He could do even greater things. The puppets and believers were in charge of the specific planning and execution. For the time being, Luo Nan only needed to support the maintenance framework before the even more desperate situation arrived. He also needed to remotely command and make adjustments. At this time, he was very happy to go with Xue Lei to find God and discuss matters related to the burners and the deep blue walkers. God was a veteran burner. Although he had already retired from the military, he was still inextricably linked to it. He told Xue Lei frankly, the military's Deep Blue Walkers project has always been conducting research on imparting martial arts to the fleshly body. However, if you want to participate deeply in it, you'll definitely need to be registered in the military, and you'll also be subject to many restrictions. Quantum Corporation definitely has it, but the corresponding binding agreement isn't easy either. Aside from this, there was also the Frost River Reality Project, which was a collaboration between many powers. The project was relatively deep. Therefore, he was the same as Luo Nan. He recommended Xue Lei to start with a professional simulator to get a feel for it. Then Xue Lei and God discussed the similarities and differences between the internal energy of a burner and the internal refinement method of imparting martial arts. This had already entered a more professional level. Luo Nan very rarely interrupted, but he combined his experiences with the burner simulator with the two sides. He listened with great interest. However, they did not chat for long. God had to go deal with the security team, so the chat could only be interrupted. Xue Lei had an expression of wanting to continue. His fighting spirit had already been provoked. He pulled Luo Nan and said, "Why don't we practice some sans ho?" Luo Nan was about to agree when Cat Eyes shouted, "You too! Come over and help!" Ha! Cat Eyes and Rue-Wen had been at loggerheads ever since she received the mission the night before yesterday. She took care of Rue-Wen, and she liked Rue-Wen. However, she was still a bit dissatisfied with the little girl's cold and distant attitude towards life. She always wanted the little girl to do something. After unremitting efforts, she finally found a pretty decent entry point after lunch today. She pointed to the side of the living room on this floor. There was a photo frame that had just been placed there not too long ago. She giggled and said, "Look, the design on the photo might be a tradition of their Luo family." The photo Cat Eyes pointed to was the weird photo of his grandfather and father that Luo Nan had copied from his uncle this morning. No matter how tangled and complicated his heart was, Luo Nan still treasured this photo very much. He specifically found an electronic photo frame to place it in. However, he had not yet decided whether he should place it in his home or place it in the space of the dead tree with his mother's photo. He could only place it in the living room on the 4th floor of Gear. This was the place with the best lighting in Gear under sunny weather. Cat Eyes did not care about the tangled feelings in Luo Nan's heart. She seized the opportunity to urge him with all her might. "What do you mean by tradition? You pose according to the photo, I'll take a photo, and then we'll put it together. You don't even need to wait until the evening gathering. You'll be considered a member of the Luo family. As for whether you'll be a daughter or a child bride in the future, it's all a trifle." Cat Eyes revealed her intention to tease Luo Nan, but Rue-Wen naturally did not respond. Cat Eyes teased Luo Nan several times to no avail, but she did not give up. Her eyeballs swiveled, and she called out to Luo Nan and the others. "Rue-Wen says that the restoration of a single pose isn't enough. Someone with the surname Luo, come over here. Is it really okay for you to tamper with right and wrong in front of your own boss, a mental sensing expert?" But no matter what was said, Cat Eyes' thoughts and actions were all for Rue-Wen's good. If Luo Nan could help this little girl integrate a step further into this society, then Luo Nan really wouldn't mind making a few weird faces. So Luo Nan's ridicule was ridicule, but he did not refuse. He obediently walked over and revealed a smile to Rue-Wen. "Then how about we pose together?" Rue-Wen's clear and tranquil eyes streaked across his face. It was impossible to tell what she was leaning towards. But Cat Eyes tricked him again at this time. In the end, she did not let Xue Lei go. "Why don't you guys go first and demonstrate once to dispel the child's nervousness? First your friend Luo Xue Pei, then your family member Luo Rue Pei. There's nothing wrong with that." Xue Lei's temper did not care, but he was reminded by Cat Eyes' abbreviation. He suddenly had a strange thought. When we adopt her, will Rue-Wen still be called Rue-Wen? Will she be called Luo Rue-Wen at that time, or will she follow Uncle Luo Nan's surname and be called Amo Rue-Wen? Luo Nan discussed with him very seriously. The name is just a symbol, but those two are quite hard to pronounce. Cat Eyes sneered. Don't deliberately change the topic. Do you think I don't know what you guys are thinking? Go, stand in front of the photo frame. Split into two sides. Luo Nan on the left. Xuelei on the right. Pose properly. Xuelei grinned and looked at the photo again. His eyelids twitched. We agreed that it's a demonstration. No photos. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go. Luo Nan and Xuelei were truly in a difficult situation. They glanced at each other, but they were helpless. They could only follow Cat Eyes' instructions and stand on the two sides of the electronic photo frame. They followed the poses of the two people in the photo frame and slightly staggered their angles. Then they continued to communicate with their eyes. You first. You first. Everyone together. Okay. That kind of pose only looked funny on the photo. If they really had to do it, and if they were to do it properly, it would be truly shameful. It would have been fine if Luo Nan and Xuelei did not exchange glances. But when their gazes met, they laughed until they staggered left and right a second later. There was no hope for any other pose. As their coach, Cat Eyes was extremely dissatisfied. She clapped hard. You two idiots. What happened to being role models? Luo Nan was waiting for these words. You're the coach. You're the role model. Why don't you come up and try? From Luo Nan's perspective, this was a sharp counterattack. But reality proved that he was still too young. Young. Cat Eyes' eyebrows shot up. No problem. As an outstanding dancer, Cat Eyes could unlock all sorts of poses at any time. She felt no pressure at all from a small comedy scene. Watch closely. Cat Eyes calmly took off her jacket, revealing a skin-tight protective suit. She stepped forward and pushed Xuelei aside, standing face to face with Luo Nan. Then she raised her left leg and hooked it backward. She raised her right hand up, assuming a reverse joint position. Her left arm extended backward, and her right knee bent inward. It was as if her entire body had been frozen in a high-speed rotation. This posture was awkward no matter how one looked at it. It was funny no matter how one looked at it. But Cat Eyes was an outstanding dancer. She used these elements to perfectly portray the flexible and graceful posture of a woman, especially since she was still wearing the skin-tight protective suit. Her undulating curves and soft waist made the two men in the room not know where to place their eyes. Luo Nan thought about how it was hard to avoid making a fool of himself, so he seized the last bit of time he had to tease Cat Eyes. Leister, where are you looking? Xuelei was innocently implicated, but the moment of crisis revealed his true colors. He directly responded, Sister Cat Eyes' posture isn't precise enough. Luo Nan looked at Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes' posture was restored to its original state, and she raised her eyebrows. Xuelei was right. She had indeed made some slight adjustments to her posture when she was imitating. After all, the sense of harmony and beauty of any plastic art was reflected in the details. Stiffness and gentleness were perhaps only a tenth of a curve, 1/100th of a millimeter. But she obviously wouldn't show weakness at this time. She forcefully retorted, If you can do it, then go ahead. Luo Nan immediately seized the opportunity to pull away. Come. I'll give you this position. Compare. Cat Eyes gave him a supercilious look. Xuelei had put himself on the stage with a single sentence. It was hard not to be embarrassed. Luckily, Cat Eyes had already demonstrated. Right now, they could be considered to be having a friendly professional exchange of pointers. In fact, he really did become a bit interested after the round of observation just now. I think it should be like this. Xuelei assumed the same posture as he spoke. He was over a head taller than Cat Eyes. His body was majestic, but his flexibility wasn't the least bit inferior. He wasn't the least bit afraid of the posture that Cat Eyes could assume. But when he assumed the proper posture, it really did make people feel a bit different. Oh, it seems like it really is a bit. Cat Eyes rubbed her chin as she circled around Xuelei. She might have been joking a bit at first, but she unconsciously became serious later on. Is this the limit of the joints? Your ligaments are quite taut. Xuelei maintained his posture without changing. He responded, It's all right. This posture is actually quite reasonable. The limbs are relaxed, and the tendons and arteries receive force. If you do Daoyin or yoga, you can coordinate this posture with the starting and ending posture. It can still provide a certain amount of exercise. Huh. Luo Nan's heart inexplicably jumped. Cat Eyes shook her head. There's no need to force your way up. There's no utilitarian meaning. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Luo Nan was secretly trying it out, so he was naturally discovered. Luo Nan's face heated up under Cat Eyes' mocking gaze, but he still persevered. He searched for the feeling of the limbs being relaxed, and the tendons and arteries receiving force that Shui Lei spoke of. His thoughts drifted a bit. Grandpa and that person might joke around, relax and the like, but if they really did leave something for me, wouldn't it have a deeper meaning? Luo Nan also felt that he was reading too much into it, but the external neuron left behind by a certain person was far too mysterious and marvelous. The method was far too secretive. It gave him a bad precedent. Give it a try. There's nothing wrong with giving it a try. Cat Eyes could not help but roll her eyes. Do you really think this is a secret martial arts manual? Can you find out the true meaning of formatting theory from this? Luo Nan's face really turned red this time. He really did have similar thoughts in the corner of his heart. Cat Eyes shook her head, but in the blink of an eye, she felt that this was a rare opportunity. Since Luo Nan had delivered himself to her doorstep, then he shouldn't blame her for being impolite. She giggled and retreated a few steps back. She prepared to find a good angle to take a picture of this rare scene. She had just chosen a position and gestured a bit. She could not help but laugh in spite of herself. Hey, Rue Wan. You really can't wait to enter the Luo family's door. She saw Rue Wan, who was beside her, actually cast off her usual indifference. She copied the pose in the photo, twisting her body and exerting force. She stretched her arms and legs. Her usual wooden expression contrasted beautifully with the two serious faces in the photo. The more she acted like this, the more adorable she became. Cat Eyes laughed out loud. She formed a circle with her index finger and thumb, and the synchronized virtual lens centered around Rue Wan. The three figures were encircled. She just needed to exert a bit of force with her fingertips, and the gesture response would be effective. She would record this rare scene. But at this moment, a low and deep sound wave permeated the room. The sound was like the rustling of rain falling on the eaves. It was dense like a tide crashing against the shore. For an instant, it was as if Cat Eyes was standing in the middle of a surging river. The sound of water filled her surroundings, and deep within, there was the sound of shrieking. Cat Eyes clearly wanted to exert force with her fingers, but they suddenly froze in this moment. It was hard to move an inch. Ouch! Luo Nan suddenly turned around, but he forgot his current position. He committed the lowest of mistakes. He sat solidly on the ground, ignoring the pain in his butt. He raised his head to look in astonishment. It was as if Cat Eyes had just woken up from a dream. She subconsciously exerted force with her fingers. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.